Hello everyone, and welcome to This Nintendo Life, episode 228. My name is NBZ, and as time goes on, I feel like I should just... I have these lists, Bally, of like my YouTube Watch Later playlist and my podcast list of like hundreds of podcasts I haven't listened to. And, you have this thing where you're like, you know what, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm cutting out of my life. And I'm getting to that point where I'm like, should I be doing that? Because like I'm behind on podcasts, I'm behind on YouTube videos. It's all just like falling to the wayside.
Here's the secret.
Yeah.
If you really want to watch a YouTube video, you watch a YouTube video.
But see,
if you
that's not true.
don't want to watch a YouTube video, you don't watch a YouTube video.
This is not true, and I'll tell you patently why. It's because sometimes you have enough time to watch like a 5-minute YouTube video, but you do want to watch that 1-hour no-clip documentary. You really want to, but you don't have the time right now at this current moment.
1.5 speed it. 1.5 speed
Exactly, yes, but even 1.5 speed, that's 45 minutes. But you've only got 5 minutes now, right, between a meeting or whatever, and you want to watch something. This is my issue, because like I love long-form content. I love watching all these things. But then it gets to a point where I have 2 weeks where I do nothing but play a video game, and then I'm behind on literally everything else in my life. And I don't know, it just gets to me, This is the problem, Bally, with liking too many things, is it just grinds me down. But I don't know, I feel like this experience of just playing Xenoblade and doing nothing else, it's been so enjoyable that maybe I just lean into stuff that I want to do all the time, and just go where the wind takes me and not worry about the backlog as much. But but that's the thing that we'll go through and eventually figure out. But hello, Bally, how are you doing? You're not suffering from existential dread of media, are you?
I feel freed from my YouTube watch list,
Okay.
and I just dabble with it. There's a video I want to watch it, and then I tend to like check back into videos as well. I treat them a bit more like podcasts. I don't necessarily have to watch a long video in a one-hour, although that does feel very good when you're able to.
Well, I know that you guys sometimes will like watch half of a movie and then come back and watch it, right?
Well, that's Bally Jr. situation, but yes.
I thought you did that before that. Generally.
Rarely. It was never a good idea before Bally Jr.,
yeah.
But now it's compulsory, basically.
Yeah, totally. No, yeah, I can't do that. The thing that really annoys me with watching movies with my family especially is like, every fucking time, if we're going to sit down to watch a movie, there will be a moment where someone gets a phone call and we'll have to be on the phone for half an hour, or someone will be like, no, we need a toilet break, let's go, pause it, and then someone else is like, oh, I'll go make coffee, and then someone else is like, oh, I need a dessert. Like, it pisses me the fuck off. I'm just like, can we just sit and just watch this entire thing?
Like the attention spans of... Well, my parents are really bad, so... Yeah. The second we're watching a movie, my dad immediately goes on Wikipedia, looks up the movie, starts looking at all the actors, and by happen chance just starts reading the plot. And it's just like, and then he starts saying what he thinks is going to happen in the movie. He's like, Dad, you've just been looking at the plot of the film. We don't want to hear your opinion. Yeah. Meanwhile, my mom's just like falling asleep. Yeah. And it's just like, this is just a great family watching experience here right now.
Just chaos. It's just never... You just can't, it doesn't work, if you're going to watch a movie with family...
I'll just watch my films by myself, go away.
Exactly. It's not going to happen, so it's a curse, it's inevitable. What are you going to do about it? You can't do much about it, but you can play video games on your own and have a good time, and that's what we do, so it's great, and we're here to do that. And Bally's going to tell you what we're going to talk about on today's show, where we talk about those video games.
3-segment show today. First segment, we've got the games that we have been playing. Second segment, we've got your emails. And third segment, there's a little bit of news, couple of game-specific directs between Pokemon and Splatoon.
Yes.
So we're going to jump into both of those.
Absolutely. Nintendo continuing to have individual beats for individual games and not do a direct. I'm sure we'll maybe...
They managed to fill up their whole year without any, direct... summer direct,
yes.
They did the spring one or whatever, and that's it. Now they filled up their year, and that's that.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll maybe talk about that generally and how we feel about it as well in that segment also. But let's kick things off, Bally, with the newest, hottest thing, because Nintendo dropped finally the second edition of, I think, the 8-part series of Mario Kart 8 DLC. That's right, isn't it? They're going to do 8 drops of this.
6 waves. I
don't think it's 6 waves. I think it's 8 because there's 8 across the top and 8 across the bottom, so it's 32, I'm pretty sure, in total. So
Is it 8?
yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the case, because we've had this discussion before about how many it is total, but I'm pretty sure we have 6 waves left to go still.
Oh right. Okay,
So
right.
yeah, there's a lot of this stuff being put out there, and supposedly they're going to get it all out by the end of 2023, which means they're probably going to have to hurry up a little bit, get the cadence up, because there's still quite a lot of stuff to release at the moment, and so they put out some new tracks, ones that include stuff again from the mobile game, some previous.
It's 6 waves.
Are you sure?
Yeah,
In total?
it's 6 waves. The first one launched in March 2022, and the final one's coming end of 2023.
Yeah, I mean that's
48 tracks.
48, right? So if you divide 48 by 8,
8.
it's 8 times 6.
6.
Right? Yes. Okay. All right. Maybe it
There
is
we go.
6 waves.
6
All right.
waves.
Okay.
8
Cool.
tracks each.
I did think it was like a huge amount, but maybe it's not that huge.
I mean, it is a huge amount because 8 tracks like per wave is just insane.
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff, and obviously people have talked before about like the repurposing of like it's mobile tracks that they're bringing across, and they're kind of like touching up some old like GBA ones and Super Nintendo ones again, and also bringing back some fan favorites like Waluigi Pinball is a part of this set, which is fantastic. One of my favorite from the DS for sure. Really love that track, but for the first time here they're bringing a brand new track, although I would say that's like tinged with a bit of a caveat because this track is brand new. However, I think it was intended to go into the mobile game eventually anyway, so it was almost designed for that but released first with this DLC. So it will be coming to tour, but has not yet gone in there, which I would say you could see in its design. It definitely like it's cool and it's creative, but at the end of the day it's just kind of a loop and there's not a lot going on with it. I think that's kind of the crux of my issue with this DLC as a whole, is there's just not a lot going on with it when it comes to some of the courses and some of the things that have been ported over, especially I think the biggest point of comparison for me was when after I played them, I always go back and play some older tracks, and it always feels like a stark difference in terms of the quality level, and just the way in which the Ribbon track from the GBA, like you look at how well that was adapted, all the different things that go on there, like the kind of rolling waves of the ribbon as you go off it, and you can like bounce on those, all these little touches, and then you play the Snowland one, and it's like, okay, this is just kind of like an ice course, and there's
because they're both Game Boy Advance glow-ups,
right,
but one is like Toy Story Mark II, and the other one is like a fairly standard snow ice course.
Right.
I think another good comparison is say like the new Mario Kart Circuit 3 from Super Nintendo, and it's had the treatment. It looks pretty good, but then we played like one of the DLC SNES tracks, Rainbow Road. And it's just got the most incredible lighting. You were like commenting on like the little mushroom houses down below, and like it's got the undulating track, and it's just got a real polish to it that is just not the same as these new tracks, even though they're coming from the same games. And it's kind of just like, I don't know. Could you not have released these tracks on tour, but also given them the console glow up? Like, is there a way of not necessarily just literally porting it in such a clean and basic way?
Yeah, I don't know. I think what has this team been doing? Because they made ARMS right in 2017, and seemingly now they're working on these courses going out. But like, there's 5 years of downtime in between then, of nothing. Which I think
ARMS is Switch launch.
Yeah, exactly. Which I think, I mean, obviously speaks to a lot of times when it comes to development, especially within Nintendo. It's the rare instance where we get the peek behind the curtain like we did with Metroid Prime 4, where they just kind of jump the gun early, and they're like, oh, whoops, no, we're actually rebooting the whole development, and we're moving the studio, and like, ideally, Nintendo would never have announced Metroid Prime 4, and we wouldn't even know it exists until like the year before they actually put it out.
Yeah.
But there are certain games, certain franchises where they feel like Zelda, a prime example, where they're like, okay, here's Breath of the Wild 2, and we're like, what? And it's been 4 years since they first showed it, right? So it's one of those instances where I do wonder if they had a project that was happening and had been going on for a while and then got cancelled for whatever reason, and we're just never going to hear about it, and we're never going to know what it was. It probably is, that is the case, and That's a shame, and it feels like that happened with Retro as well after Tropical Freeze, because they hadn't put out anything since They still haven't put out anything since 2014 with Tropical Freeze, which is a staggering amount of time. But I do think it speaks to a lot of development studios within Nintendo will have projects that just get cancelled and nothing happens. So I don't know. In terms of raising the quality bar, not that this feels like a panic move, but it feels like they ran out of Smash Brothers characters, and so they wanted to have a thing that continued that legacy, almost that kind of big DLC push that they could have out there. And so they were kind of like, well, what do we do about this? Oh, we got a bunch of those tracks from the mobile game. Let's kind of do that and touch them up a little bit, but not do too much other work to them.
I think we talked about this before, but I think there's also a decent chance that like chip shortage could have resulted in a delay to the next Switch or Switch Pro, and that this is kind of like, it's not until that next console that we'll get a Mario Kart 9, and because of that delay, they're like, right, well, that's going to be 2, 3, 4 years down the line, therefore we need to fill that time with more Mario Kart. Let's go for DLC potentially, you know.
Yeah, and a smart thing to do would be launch the next system with a Mario Kart, because it works so well for them this time. It would be weird, I guess the Switch being one of Nintendo's most successful consoles and not having an original Mario Kart on it. I don't know. You could argue that like the Wii U doesn't really matter, and so Switch is really where Mario Kart 8 exists. I mean, it's the place where it sold the most for sure, but it is still strange.
Like, does the Wii U technically have like an original Zelda if it's Breath of the Wild?
That's another thing, isn't it? It's like the Switch technically doesn't have an original Zelda because that game was built for Wii U originally, right? So I don't know. The Switch is in this weird place in that sense, even though it is wildly successful and the biggest thing possible. But we played these. I've played them through once on my own, and we played through all of them online together, and I think they're fun. They're okay. There's like definitely Waluigi Pinball is a standout for me. I think that track just is so much fun from a design standpoint, and the way that the balls go around the arena, and all the kind of like being shot up at the beginning. It has a real kind of verve to it, and I think that it looks really nice as well. It's probably the best looking track, I would say, of the ones that were released, and it makes a lot of sense because it already originally had like a cool concept behind it, and I'm a big fan of it, and I like the visuals on the ice cream one, but I do think when it comes down to it, it is really just you kind of go up and then you come down. It's like a little bit of a circle, and there's just not a lot of interesting. Because I think one of the parts of Mario Kart that really appeals to me is like the interesting track design from the like turn perspective, and like how you approach those corners, and like knowing what's coming up and being able to like adapt based on your car and based on the build that you have, getting around those corners efficiently and properly. And if it's just a big circle, it just doesn't, unless you're Baby Park, in which case the whole point is the tiny circle and the chaos of it. I don't know, it just doesn't quite work for me in the same way. I don't know how you feel about it, Bally.
Yeah, I think especially with the Sky High Sunday one, when you add a lot of verticality to a track and you're going up and then you're coming down, it's much harder to drift like effectively because you're getting less grip from going up and down. Right. So the track, as you say, very much is just quite a simple loop and then an up and a down, and there's not a ton of anticipating corners and drifting and this sort of thing, which is maybe the complete opposite to a track like Mario Circuit 3, where it's a very flat Super Nintendo track and it's all about the cornering and preempting corners, and just feels like a much more traditional Mario Kart track, and there's a lot more fun as a result, in my opinion, and it just kind of works.
And I think that's the crux of the problem, right? Is there's one hand where you have the ice cream track, which is like the spectacle of it, and the other hand is the kind of Mario 3 track where it's like the turns of it. I feel like a lot of previous Mario Kart 8 tracks take those and put them together, and it feels like you're kind of just getting one and the other here. You're not getting those two ideas put together,
Yeah. And I think the other kind of ported tracks like Calamari Desert, they've done some nice stuff to that to add kind of like now going on the tracks a lot more than I believe you were in the N64 one.
They're basically taken a nod from Tour, which the whole concept I think behind a lot of these Tour tracks is that every lap the track changes slightly, so like you'll have a different route to go on the New York one, and the Paris one before is a similar thing where it like changes the route that you take. And so I think it's on the third lap, or maybe it's the second or the third lap, where they introduce a ramp that ramps you into the train track area, and I think that's consistent every time you play it. So it basically just gives you a different lap every time, which is cool, and I think is a nice little change. I always liked that track from previous iterations. I think it's been remade once before. It was on the 3DS maybe, I think it's a fun track, but it's okay. I don't know that I love that idea of constantly changing the track every time, because I do like just learning a loop and just getting good at it. So I don't know. It's just a little bit of that influence from Tour coming in that I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that is going to influence the rest of the series going forward, because it very well could do. I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting. But
and as you said, we were doing some GPs. I was probably getting the better of you most of the time on the 150cc, and then I was like, come on, then we got to pump this up. And I know you were pretty reticent to do some 200cc, but we did do some 200cc, and I absolutely love 200cc.
I cannot fucking stand 200cc.
I absolutely love it. And here's another reason I love 200cc is I think it makes the weapons less effective, because I feel like when you get punished by a weapon in 200cc, if you're good at driving, you can work your way up the pack faster than you can in 150cc. And I personally really hope that 200cc like stays for like the next Mario Kart, because you can barely play 200cc online, because everyone basically difficulty and people's rankings attribute to the cc you go on. So often it's 100 or 150, and you're not really ever doing 200 unless you're playing with a bunch of pros. And
is that how they do it? That's really weird.
Yeah. It's really bad. It's very bad, honestly. Not that I've played a ton of online, but no. I don't love it. So yeah, we need to get you into 200cc.
It is honestly like as I was saying this last night, it is honestly a completely different video game. Like I literally don't understand how to play it. I came last, I'm pretty sure, out of all the CPUs, and I think you came first. And like I think that says so much that I was like doing okay. Like I was coming like third or fourth.
This is like the old days.
Yes,
when we were younger and you're going backwards around the track, and I'm just winning everywhere.
It felt like I was a 9-year-old again. I cannot fucking stand this 200. It's too much for me. Like I don't know how to play it. Like my Mario Kart muscle memory is built around using like never letting go of accelerate basically. And in 200cc's, you have to let go of accelerate. Either that, or you have to like feather the B button to like shift your way around corners.
Feather the B button, but you can feather it a lot more heavy on certain corners than others.
Yeah, and like drifting and turning is just almost not possible. Like there's certain tracks where it does make sense and you can do it, but there are certain ones where like the corners are too tight to do it, and you can't really make it work. You have to have, it feels to me anyway, you have to have almost a custom kart to do 200cc's versus any other ranking thing. But yeah, I absolutely despised it, and I certainly, if I was to play it and get into it, I would have to learn it from the ground up, right? Like relearn every track basically. It just is, it's a different ball game, and I'm very, very bad at it. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure I'll ever get to playing 200cc's properly, but we'll see. Maybe in the next game.
Give it a bit of practice. You'll get there.
Yeah. Well, next game they're going to add 250cc's, and that's where it's really going to pedal to the metal.
Oh boy. Yeah.
So we'll see.
But overall, like these tracks are still great, and
it's
Mario
good to
Kart is still great and good fun, and I cannot believe
I can't complain when it's part of the subscription, right? Like I'm not actually paying for these. Well, exactly. I am, but I'm not.
Paying extra.
I'm not paying extra.
And
for them,
there's just so many more tracks to come, and there's rumors of some great sounding tracks that I'm looking forward to, and these are great. And Mario Kart is a good time. I'm looking forward to one day giving Bally Jr. a little go at Mario Kart.
Yeah. Have all those steer assist things on. That's great,
Well, he's probably going to beat you at 200cc.
Well, yeah, you know what? I would not be surprised that
that's your deadline.
When he gets to like age 6, that's game over for me. Probably gonna wipe the floor with me. Yeah, sounds good. Bally, you have been continuing on with an RPG that we talked about last time, Live Alive.
Live Alive, live a live alive, live live.
Yes, I mean, I'm pretty sure Nintendo's official marketing says Live Alive, but every
do.
time anyone talks about this on a podcast, they have to
they do like 3 minutes of Live Alive jokes, and it's like, okay, we're all playing the same game, guys.
Here we go.
Having said that, we just made the joke.
Yeah,
But anyway,
exactly,
yes.
yeah.
I am now in the second portion of the game, which I'm not going to talk about, also because I'm literally 3 seconds into the opening cutscene.
Okay, cool.
But I thought what would be fun is if I gave like a ranking of the opening 7 chapters. So if you're unaware, you can play these in any order, and there's 7 chapters. And if you're just coming to the game fresh, I'm not going to spoil any of these chapters, but like if you're coming to the game fresh, honestly, I would say try and play them from worst to best, because you will just have a progressively better and better experience of the game. I definitely mixed it up, and that was fine, but there's definitely a couple of dud chapters in there.
Yeah.
Or maybe like one, to be honest.
I mean, I might say maybe start with a good one and then go to the bad ones, because I think like when you're starting a game, you want to enjoy, like you want to get into it, right? And you want to have fun with some of the openings. The demo is great for, because the demo I think has a couple of really good starting chapters that you can go from there. But yeah, no, I think definitely I was trying to get through the worst ones a bit earlier so I could have the better ones as I went later into the game. So yeah.
So my number 7 is easily Prehistoric Past.
Yeah, I thought that was the worst by far.
There's no dialogue. They just talk in like the characters, like
it's like caveman speak, basically.
Caveman speak, and it's just
they put some images up and pictures sometimes when they're trying to say stuff. Yeah,
it's quite a tough chapter. It's
really poorly balanced in terms of the enemies.
There's a lot of RNG on which enemy you're going to run into and how it's going to flatten you or not. And it's just not a great chapter. It's fine. I wouldn't say it's necessarily bad, but it's not. It's definitely number 7.
Little misogynistic in the way that old JRPGs could be, But that's kind of how it goes, I guess.
Number 6 for me was Present Day. Now a lot of people really like this one because it's kind of like it's like the fighting game.
It's like a Street Fighter tournament,
Street Fighter tournament. It's just a bit overly simple for me. It's one fight to the next, and it's not like
there's no story around it, right? Like there are a couple of ones in here that are much more narrative focused, and a couple that are a bit more kind of mechanics focused. And this one is so mechanics focused that it's literally just the battles. You don't do any exploring whatsoever. It's just battle back to back to back. But it does make it one of the shorter ones, so it's actually one of the easier ones to kind of get through in an evening if you want to.
It's the shortest for sure. Number 5 is Wild West. This is a lot of thematic Wild West themes that I think they do really well, music wise, dialogue wise. It's very good for that. Mechanically, it's kind of unique where you're preparing for like an onslaught from like this gang, and they do some unique stuff. I won't spoil it, but like it's interesting. It can also be quite a tough one, but it's also on the shorter side and middle of the pack.
Yeah, I thought that one, just to jump in, was it felt like it was going to be a bit more narrative heavy, and then almost half the chapter is that setup section, which I think takes quite a long time, and I wouldn't say gets monotonous, but it's like, okay, I basically finished doing all my setup, and then I was like, well, do I just have to wait now until the thing runs out? And I didn't realize you could like talk to somebody to fast forward it, so I was just kind of like standing there waiting for the time to run out, which was a little bit annoying.
It's a strange mechanic. I should say like each of these chapters that originally were all designed by like different dev teams apparently, which is just
all of them had different character designers, I believe, and that's the thing that shows up at they all also end with end credit sequence, so you have like 7 end credit sequences before you even get to the main part of the game, which is interesting. But this one was, for me, I died on the boss a bunch because I was messing up a lot.
It can be a very tough boss depending on how you negotiate that middle portion of the chapter.
For sure.
Number 4 for me is Feudal Japan. Story-wise, it's decent, but like I love this because it's just a very beautiful level, in my opinion. Like that like HD 2D Japanese feudal castle just looks really cool, and the way that you explore it, and I think the music thematically works nicely, and it's a very solid level, and middle of the pack for sure.
It's also a kind of a sprawling castle, like the amount of
a lot of options on what to do.
So many optional areas you can go to. The whole concept behind it is you can either go like super stealth, and there's a mechanic where you hold down a button and you basically blend into the environment. I love the way they do it with the pixel art, where he almost like takes a bit of the environment and just like hovers it, and there's a little kind of corner that you can see almost bending off it. It's a really neat trick, and you can almost like avoid guards by doing that. Alternatively, you can just kill everybody, and it's probably best advised to not go for the stealth thing, because it's really, the combat gets quite hard, and you want to be leveled up, because every time you level up you get new moves and you get more powerful, and yeah, some of the later game stuff there is a bit trickier. So I would say definitely kill some guards at least to level up, because otherwise you're going to have a hard time. But yeah, lots of exploring and finding kind of secret areas and things like that. I don't think I really explored the full extent of it, to be honest. So yeah, there's a lot of kind of exploration stuff going on in there, which is very cool.
My number 3 is the one you recommended I opened with. It was your favorite at the time, and that's Far Future.
Yeah.
Definitely the lightest on like combat, and that's fine, because I think the story is actually really good, and kind of it's being influenced by so many sci-fi horror-y kind of themes, and it's just, there's a lot of characters in this one. There's a lot of stuff that happens. That's also maybe my scariest moment of the year in a video game, which is surprising for a game like Live Alive. But this is a very, very strong one. It's really good fun. If the downside of opening with it was I kind of wanted to get into the game and learn mechanics of the game, and I think a chapter like maybe Feudal Japan's actually really good for jumping in and learning the mechanics of the battle mechanics, I should say. But if you're just there for some plot, like Far Future's awesome. Yeah,
it's basically a visual novel, right? At that point, there's a lot of just walking around the station, and you play as a little robot, so you're almost like observing the crew and as things happen, which is really, really cool. Yeah, lots of interesting twists and turns, and yeah, that's a really good one. I like that one a lot.
The last two I did as my top two I did as my final two. My number 2 is Ancient China. Really cool. You're playing as like this, basically like a kung fu master, isn't he? And
the Shifu.
Shifu, and he wants to pass on his kung fu knowledge to essentially a disciple, I guess. And you find some disciples, and he trains them, and it goes from there. Basically, I won't spoil what happens, but again, the pixel art for Ancient China just looks incredible, and the music is very, very strong in this chapter. And yeah, just the mountains and the mist, and there's like a bamboo forest that just it really, like, I'm just in love with HD 2D. It just really makes settings like this pop in, while still living up to that sprite based design and that kind of style of game. It's very cool. And then plot wise, stuff happens, and it's good. I do think overall this game is actually very dark, much more dark than you might anticipate.
Yeah, definitely.
It's one of those things where I think people who don't know the video game medium see a game like this and think it's designed specifically for kids, and it's like, it's really not. It's quite
a lot of mature themes in Live Alive for sure.
A lot of mature themes,
lots of swearing and stuff like that. And yeah, I do think this one is a really interesting inversion, because you basically start as the most powerful character, and you are kind of slowly building up your disciples, like leveling them up by destroying them almost, right? Like you're the unbeatable, unwinnable boss in a cutscene, and they can't do anything to you until they start getting better and better, and then slowly, they start giving you a bit more of a challenge. It's a really cool like inversion of that idea of building up, like, because in a traditional story you would be one of the disciples, and you would kind of be building yourself up slowly, but the idea that you are the master at the max level at that point it's a really, really cool idea. So yeah, like that one a great deal.
And then the best chapter, and I do think this might actually be by some distance in my opinion, is the Near Future. I love this level. First of all, I have an absolute thing for this style of Japan. It's like Japanese art. There's something about Japanese architecture and combined with like trees and overgrown like green, basically, where it's hard to describe. But if you think of loads of Japanese anime film settings like Your Name, it's this 70s 80s style gray block style architecture, but then surrounded by lush green trees, and then they add like an artistic effect. If you think of like the opening levels in a game like Kirby and the Forgotten Land, it's that stark grey block buildings next to very green lush environments, and I just love that about a lot of Japanese like media generally, but this chapter oozes that. And
there's almost like an Earthbound quality to it as well.
Yes.
From what I've played so far anyway. I'm only like 10 minutes into it, and this is the only one I haven't finished yet. It's it's the one that I'm going to get back to, and it's good to hear that you think it's the best one, because that excites me.
And it's funny because the main character Akira is like every single Japanese anime boy you've ever seen. He's like got Yu-Gi-Oh hair, but he literally looks like Chrono, but he's also influenced by Ash Ketchum, and like he's there's something about him where he's like this homogenized version of so many characters you've seen in different things put together. And yeah, I really don't want to say much about this one because there's like kind of a lot of reveals and things.
I mean, like the core mechanic that they start you off with is you can read people's minds, which is a really cool concept of like you go and talk to an NPC, but then you press a button and then you can read the mind of them and see what they're actually thinking. Which like I'm sure they do a lot of cool stuff with it as you go through, but that's kind of like the setup as you get into it, which is awesome.
And it gets influenced by a lot of other Japanese anime things that I'm aware of, even as someone who's not massively
interesting.
Japanese
See,
anime.
Bally,
So, like,
you liking this so much makes me think let's find some anime to get you into. It's a good thing to do.
Yeah, but it's really cool, and it's got like this cool overworld map that looks quite a lot like Earthbound, like you said, and it's just a very strong chapter. And yeah, now I'm in the second portion of the game, and I guess we'll go from there. I should, supposedly the next portion is maybe like up to half the game, so it could be a while before I beat this, but hopefully by next time I should be close at least.
Awesome. Yeah, and maybe I'll get back to it. Depends how much more Xenoblade I'm gonna play.
But I mean, I love the bite-sized nature of those 7 chapters I just discussed. Like they are really, really cool, and like even the longest one is under 2.5 hours, 3 hours. Like it's really cool stuff.
They're very easy to just jump in an evening and just play through one of them. So you can make nice progress as you go through a week or whatever. So, yeah, very good. So, Bally, let's talk about Xenoblade Chronicles 3 again.
Xenoblade Chronicles 3.
Oh, boy. So, last time I had played 17 hours. We're 2 weeks removed from that. I have now played 107 hours. I have finished the game. I have rolled credits. However, there is a bunch of post-game stuff. There are a bunch of quests I haven't done yet. I'm jumping back in after the credits. I'm doing all this stuff. I can't put this game down. This game is absolutely fucking fantastic. It is pretty easily, I think, going to be my game of the year unless anything changes. Like, I don't think that's going to happen, and it's very much in my wheelhouse, right? Like, I expected to like this game, and, obviously I did like it, but I'm kind of blown away by a lot of different elements of it, and I think that there's stuff in there that they have really leveled up on as a studio. Generally, like, when I look back on Xenoblade 2, one of the things that really didn't strike a chord with me was...
You were nowhere near as hot as this.
No.
Like, where did 2 come in your top 10?
I think it was number 8 in that year.
Wow. Like, that. See, like, for a Xenoblade game, you're like number 8 versus this, I think, really shows how much they've improved. Yeah,
for sure. And, like, one of the big things is character-wise. Like, I just didn't like the characters like, I think Rex is just terrible. He's just really... The voice acting is awful. Like, it's just... The voice direction, I don't know what happened, because Xenoblade 1 has excellent voice direction, excellent voice acting, and there was just this stark drop-off. It just suddenly became terrible, and I just didn't understand why. And they have absolutely, like, leveled that up here, because these are, I think, the best characters in the series. They are absolutely phenomenal. So much depth, like, so much richness to their backstories, like, just caring about, like, where they come from, where they're going. I was so emotionally invested in this, and, like, multiple points in time, like, to the point of tears. Like, really legitimately hard-hitting, gut-punching moments, which, in a story about these kids who only have a lifespan of 10 years, like, obviously it's bait for that type of stuff, but I think the way that they achieve it, the way that they build up these characters to these moments, like, the whole of Chapter 5 is probably my favorite sequence in a Xenoblade game. It is just... You get story reveal after story reveal, character moment after character moment. There's a moment where it opens up into an area where I was like, okay, this game's pretty big. Like, these areas are huge. I've been exploring them and like filling in the map as I usually do. I get to this one area and my jaw fucking hits the floor at how absolutely staggeringly huge it is. It is unbelievable. And like, even in a year with stuff like Elden Ring, where it's like, yeah, look at these landscapes and the kind of the extent of like this massive Erd tree and all this like stuff, and it's super high visual and all that stuff. There is no game series, no game that comes close to the scale that Xenoblade is able to achieve. And it's remarkable what they're able to do. It's having the sense of you being so small in a world that is so absolutely enormous. No other studio makes games like this that have that sense of scale. It is utterly astonishing. And even on the Switch, which, you know, has been held back in terms of power level and, you know, having a big world like this, obviously the frame rate is not going to be like super high, and the, you know, visual fidelity is pushing on the edge of like, you know, somewhat blurriness, not nowhere near as bad as Xenoblade 2, but, you know, you would ideally want to play this on a higher end system. And yet, even with all those caveats, there is this just sense of adventure and like grandeur to the world that really struck me. And yeah, that entire sequence, like the ending of chapter 5 is, I basically stayed up later than I should have last night because I'm just watching people's reactions to like certain story moments in this game. And I think that is the sign of something that is going to stick with me, because I do that for Xenoblade 1 all the time. Have not done it a single time for Xenoblade 2. Not once, because I barely remember the story of Xenoblade 2. I don't think anything like significant stands out to me or happens in that game. It's one of those games where like the music is fantastic, but the music almost like emotionally manipulated me into maybe caring at the time, but clearly it hasn't stuck with me. Whereas in this game, I said last time, I think the music hadn't really hit its stride yet, and I think it's kind of a different type of music that's hitting with me, right? Like the overworld theme, some of these areas, they're a lot more subtle, they're a lot kind of sadder, more melancholy, but they have that kind of like slow earworm nature to them, to where they're like very kind of like creeping into my consciousness now. And there is like a core theme, a core kind of like motif based around the flutes that is trotted out a bunch of different times, and that musical piece, that sequence, is just absolutely beautiful. And the way that they play it into cutscenes, the way that they twist on it, it really hits very, very hard. And yeah, I just think like all these characters have fantastic moments throughout. There's maybe a couple who don't get the full kind of arc that you might want, but I think it's hard to do that with a full cast of 6, because you're trying to make this an ensemble piece, and I think they generally do a really good job with that. But like the main characters, certainly with Noah and Mio, have like an amazing kind of sequence. I would say like when it comes to the end of the game, I don't think it fully landed in the same way that like the first game did for me, but it's very hard to, I think like narratively the plot of Xenoblade 1 is still the strongest, but when it comes to character relations and like the wider kind of like emotional depth, I think this game is just on another level. It really, and something that is really subtle that they've super improved on is the animation stuff, right? Like there are so many like close shots of eyes or of like mouths or like really subtle stuff being done in a way that sells those moments that otherwise, you know, in a lesser game it would be a lot more show not or tell not show, right? And in this game there's a lot more like subtle moments of a character like grasping their hand or like doing something much more subtle that kind of shows you what's happening but doesn't necessarily tell you explicitly, right? And you can infer things and you can kind of like understand what's going on as a result of that. And yeah, I was absolutely blown away by every aspect of it, right? Like there are the side quests, which I didn't get too much into last time, but there are these hero characters basically who you find along your adventure, and they basically have these fully voice acted cutscenes, these fully voice acted side quests that go through like a whole arc, go through a journey with this character, and then you get the class at the end of it. And it's this fantastic synergy between the storytelling and the mechanics of like, you want to go through and see this person's story, but then also at the end of it you get the reward of, now that you've had that bond with them, that relationship, they then pass their class on to one of your party members, and then you're able to play as that class. And all the classes are so different, like there's some really interesting, so they all fit into different archetypes of, there's attacker, defender, and healer, but some of the healer ones are really interesting. There's one called Thaumaturge, which is basically an offensive healer that I really had a lot of fun playing as, where usually healing characters are resigned to, I don't know, you're kind of standing around waiting for your arts to recharge, and you can't do that much damage, so you're just kind of like waiting until your party members take damage and then you heal them, which can be a little boring for like some of the starting classes. Whereas like this one is much more offensive based, so you are attacking a lot, you are kind of building up meters, but then you also have the ability to do a bit of healing. But because you're more offensive focused, you kind of want to patch out the rest of your party with maybe a more dedicated healer, so it's a nice kind of like counterbalance. There's Signifier later in the game, which is one that basically is a full buff character where they will buff themselves, and then one of their other arts is to share that buff with the rest of the party. And so like you can keep buffing yourself and just spreading it out, and eventually your party is just like 5 or 6 buffs on them, and they're like super powerful, and you're just like the person who's facilitating that the whole time, which is really cool. And you can kind of combine these in really interesting ways, where there's another healer class that one of their talent art, basically, which is kind of the main ability you build up to by doing your regular arts. Their talent art allows you to pause all buffs on yourself, which means that if you combine this one healer with this other healer, you can buff your party with all these things, and then the other character can basically pause them so they're frozen in time, which means that they last for a significantly longer period of time than they would otherwise. So there's some real nice synergy going on with the different classes, and you can play around a lot with that stuff. And I think because each class only has 5 different arts that you can choose from, it's a lot more simplified than before, right? Like in Xenoblade 1, the arts bar was maybe like 10 or so, or maybe 8 or 9, and every time you'd go into the menu, you'd be like, okay, I don't know which ones to choose, like what are the good ones. There's a lot of like leveling them up and kind of figuring out what was best, whereas just constraining it to only 5 arts gives you like a bit more limited ability for one character. But because you can then take arts from other classes that you've gained, the mixing and matching and just putting them together and making sure like there's a certain strategy to the timing. So like arts from one side are based on timing based, so they'll recharge on their own, and arts from the other side are based on hitting enemies and doing damage, and the number of hits you get will charge up that art. And so you want to basically match up arts of similar timing. So something takes 4 hits on the Agnes side but takes like 35 seconds, that's a bad matching, because one of them will recharge super quickly and the other one will recharge super slowly. And you basically want to get them to recharge at about the same time, because then you can pull off a fusion art, which is doing them both together. So if they both have similar timings, then they'll both pop at the same time, and you can do a fusion art, which basically does both at once, is much more powerful. So there's a lot of kind of like figuring out what skills do I want to pass over, what arts do I want to pass over, in order to make the best kind of most optimal build for each character. And I spent a lot of time in the like more time than I would think usually, of just like sitting in menus, equipping gems, equipping accessories, just like trying to make these builds work and have fun ways to go through it. But also like leveling up the classes, because when you hit level 10, then you're able to do another quest with a hero, and so they're secondary ascension quests where you get more of their story. So I think there are about 20 heroes in this game. Each of them have 2 full side quests. Each of these side quests about an hour each, and all of them are fully voice acted and full cutscenes. Honestly, feels like if you don't do these, you're kind of like missing out on core content as a part of the game. And alongside this, you also have just regular side quests that are just littered all over the place. So there's and they're all way more interesting. There's a funny one at the moment that I'm doing, which is it's a riff on Romeo and Juliet, but it's like 2 people from like different sides, and they're called Romero and Julieta, and it's just like a funny kind of riff on that. They do some cool things with, there's a whole quest about potatoes, which is like amazing, like, and it's so ridiculous, but there's a real, like, because so much of this game is about freeing these colonies, you're basically going around as the party, kind of, you're destroying what are called flame clocks, and flame clocks are the thing that's kind of the lifeblood of a colony. It's like, it's the reason that you fight, because filling up the flame clock means that you're taking the energy of your enemies, but destroying the flame clock basically frees that colony of having to participate in war anymore. And so all of the side quests become about like, well, what do we do after in a place where we're not going to fight anymore? Like, what are the problems that we face? Like, getting resources for the colony, like facilitating trade routes between them, like kind of like interesting kind of political stuff going on between the colonies, like seeing the interactions between them. It leans into a lot of that stuff in the side quests, which is a great way of like continuing the world building and building everything out, and just makes them much better than previous games where side quests were like, hello, can you go kill 5 of these things? Hello, can you go kill 7 of these things? things. Like, legitimately, that was a lot of side quests in the first game, which is why I tended to avoid them, or I would pick them up and, like, if I ended up doing them, fine, whatever. But otherwise, there was no real story hook there. And every side quest here, even if it is like just a silly one-off thing, has story implications or something that's going to further the world or do something interesting. And yeah, and in terms of like the kind of fans, like there's a lot of fan service stuff in here. If you've played the first two games, as I mentioned before, you can play this as a standalone. If you've never played the series, I definitely recommend, you know, jumping into it, because I think it's fantastic. You will get more out of it if you have played the series before, certainly. There's some really cool moments, especially near the end, and even in the post-game. Like, the post-game quests that I have are so fucking exciting to me because they are directly, like, targeted at me. And I guess speaking of that, like, with the world exploration, because some of these areas are clearly places from the first two games, it's just that kind of sense of nostalgia, that sense of like revisiting a place you haven't been before. And there was one particular moment where I was exploring somewhere and I went behind this area and I saw this giant kind of ladder going up, and I'm like, wait a fucking second, I know what this is. I think I know exactly what the hell this is. Is the game gonna let me do this? And so I keep climbing, I keep going up, and sure enough, it is like a location from the first game that is one of my favorites in video games. And the way that they like bring it back, like, there's no narrative tied to this. This is just me finding this place, and I had like a very visceral reaction to it. I was absolutely like blown away. So like, not only in the narrative, not only in the kind of like systems and the game mechanics, but in the world exploration as well, in like all the side quests. Like, it is it just feels like this is the culmination of what Monolith Soft have been trying to do for so long, which is to create something that really has a big impact, and just sings on every single level. Like, there are no kind of frustrating parts or elements. Like, there are little things where, like, okay, so some quests require you to find items and they don't put them on the map, and, you know, there are little things of like, oh, I want to go to this place in the map, but I have to go to the full map and then teleport there. But those are like such minor, tiny little niggles in a thing that otherwise for me it's the only thing I want to do. It's the only thing I want to play. Like, video games rarely come along like this that take over my entire mind space. The reason I'm behind on podcasts is because I'm trying to find anyone talking about Xenoblade in any place just to get more of it into my veins. It is an obsession, but also like something that I dearly love, and I think overall in time could be something to surpass the first game. I still like, it's very hard because of the nostalgia rooted in that first game, but every element really just sings and surpasses it in so many ways. So yeah, I am in love with Xenoblade 3. I think it is one of the best games of the year. I think it's one of the best games on the Switch, and I think that, you know, if you care about narrative, if you care about storytelling, this is a series that, like, you know, there are games out there that, you know, have hour-long cutscenes. This is one of those. Like, the end of Chapter 5 into Chapter 6 is like an hour and a half of cutscenes, and it is fucking incredible the whole time through. Yeah, I'm so in love with everything it's doing. It's
and if you're intimidated by long games and JRPGs, yes, is there enough there to get over the hump?
Yeah, I think the game starts really strong. Like, if you want to talk about getting into a game, often JRPGs are slow starts, and I think that's what puts a lot of people off. It's like, it's small little guy in small little village, and let's take a while to introduce all these things. And I think partly why the genre does that is because there's a lot of mechanics it has to introduce, and it's the same here. There's a lot to introduce, but it does it over a slow-paced period of time. Like, it introduces things one by one to get you to know them, to get you to learn them. But it really, because it's about these people, these kids in the middle of a war, like, you start in the middle of a war. Like, it pops up really quickly, and you're very quickly into it, and almost instantaneously, like, getting interesting backstory on them, like, getting a sense of this world, what's going on. And it does that thing that Xenoblade is so good at doing, of like breadcrumbing little information as you go on. And it's an interesting thing with games where, like, some games I find I can spend hours and hours playing and just not realize it, and time just kind of goes past, versus other ones where I'm like, wow, man, it hasn't even been half an hour yet. I feel like I've been playing this for a while. And Xenoblade is one of those where time just melts. It just absolutely disappears. So, you know, it is 100 hours, right? But it didn't feel like it. Like, it felt far fewer than that for me. And I think that's just testament to the way that you can get wrapped up in it. But obviously, you know, if you're someone who doesn't really have the time to play a 100-hour game, regardless, if you just don't have the time, probably isn't for you. But I still think that, you know, it's a journey worth going on if you're the type of person who does have that time. So yeah, there you go. Xenoblade Chronicles 3, absolutely fucking phenomenal. And yeah, I'm still playing it. And another testament to like, I usually roll credits and I'm done. Absolutely not. No, I'm probably gonna put 150 hours into this game. Like, I absolutely adore it. It is phenomenal. So there you go. Xenoblade 3, fantastic. We're gonna be back after the break, where we're gonna get into some of your emails, chatting about them, and diving in deep. See you in a bit.
Welcome back to the second segment of today's show. It is time for your emails. So we're doing okay for emails, but as we always say, we always need more.
Get emails.
If you'd like to send an email into the show, please email thisnintendolife@gmail.com. That is thisnintendolife@gmail.com. We also have a channel on our Discord server. You can leave a post, a comment, a question. Go join the community. We'd also really appreciate that. So our first email is actually from Discord. It's from Aviuri. Who
knows? Maybe we'll have to ask and find out.
We'll have to find out. Hi y'all. Are there any games or series you feel like you should love but don't? I'm a huge fan of RPGs, open world games, high fantasy, sci-fi, and long narratives, but can't seem to get interested. Close your ears, Emmy said.
Oh, no.
Can't seem to get interested in Xenoblade. I really tried to get into the series with Xenoblade Chronicles X, and think I clocked around 180 hours into it before I realized I wasn't having fun.
Okay, all right.
And didn't care for the story or characters enough to even fight the final boss. I rarely buy a game I don't finish, and the whole experience left a bad taste in my mouth. At the same time, I see Xenoblade community sing endless praise for the series, and I want to jump back in, but I'm wary of encountering the same level of anime tropes, frustrating UI, and boring side quests that pushed me away in the first place. Have you ever gotten back into a series that initially you felt just wasn't for you? Keep being awesome, Aviuri.
All right. I mean, I generally don't understand people who have played 100 hours of something before they realize they don't like it. Like,
I'll put this out there. I played 30 hours of Xenoblade X before I bounced off it, and I thought that was like a hell of a lot of time to spend on something. So 180,
exactly.
That's a lot.
Yeah, you do see it all the time on Steam, though. There'll be these people who are like 500 hours in this game, and their review is a negative review, and they're like, I hate this game, it is the worst thing I've ever played, and, you know, they've played 500 hours. I really don't understand that. Like, if you don't like a game, putting that much time into it seems a little counterintuitive, but maybe it's that hope, right? It's that hope of like, well, I should like this, maybe I'll get there with it. Interesting that X is the one that you played, because X is very different from the rest of the series. Like, it is very much an outlier in terms of its mechanics and storytelling. Like, it is very much an open world exploration focused game with little to no care for a main story. Like, the main story in X is almost gated behind side quest progress. Like, I believe you have to do a bunch of side quests in order to even unlock the ability to do more main quests. And the main quest itself is like a little shallow, has some interesting reveals and stuff, but overall it's not really the whole point of that game. Like, side stories and side content is like the main thrust of what makes Xenoblade X the game that it is. And so, like, if you want like big narratives and stuff like that, that's not the game that you're going to get it from. Whereas the other Xenoblade games, are very different, right? Like they very much lean into that kind of guided experience with also the open nature of it to go off and do side stuff if you want, but like the main story is very clear. You're very much going on a journey the whole way through, and it's much more, it's better with its payoff, it's better with its setup, all that sort of stuff. Now if you're talking about like anime tropes, don't play Xenoblade 2, because like that is the most anime of them all, and I think it leans into them very badly, especially with the character design and stuff like that. Like it's just not great. And the frustrating UI certainly can pop up in some of these games. They've definitely refined it. Like the UI in 3 is fantastic. So like, I think you're talking about the last segment, Bally, where you're like, well, would you recommend this to, people who don't have 100 hours or stuff like that? And I was saying, yeah, I'd recommend it to people who have the time, who are interested. And clearly, if you're putting 180 hours into Xenoblade X, I would assume you have the time and are interested in this type of game. I would 100% recommend Xenoblade 3. I think it's going to do everything that you're looking for, really, right? Like it avoids a lot of those tropes. Like it feels much more emotional and real and like grounded. These characters like extremely well written and like fantastic performances across the board. Side quests that like really enrich and strengthen the world building, and the UI is much better. Like it's not perfect, but it's way better than it was. So like it is interesting that you got pushed away, but you got pushed away from an entry in the series that is basically the black sheep of the series. Like it is the entry that is the least similar to what the rest of the series is.
I think it's got some really rough systems in the way that it teaches you those as well. Like I found it really like monotonous, but also just like turgid, and just the way it just doesn't explain things to you, and
it's really fucking complicated.
Yeah, and there's not, as you said, there's not enough fun plot beats and characters along the way to kind of keep you going, which is often I'm often in this weird balance with JRPGs where I'm like, am I managing the mechanics enough and enjoying some of the difficulties in them in order to reach the next story beat or next character reveal or whatever? And Xenoblade was like this really Chronicles X, I should say, was this really bad combination in my view of like very heavy on the mechanics and incredibly light on like the story that I cared about, to the point where I was like 30 hours in like this. I got like my mech to drive around. I wasn't flying obviously, but like I was like, yeah, this just isn't enough for me. I'm just not. There's no way I'm going to spend like another 50 hours with this game, which is what I kind of need to do to beat it. So
yeah, exactly. And like for me, I love the exploration of these games so much, and just running around these worlds, that like the carrot on the stick of the flying mech was like good enough for me that I just wanted to get to that. Like, and I had to, and it was a payoff that was worth it in the end. But I do consider this like a bit of an outlier when it comes to the Xenoblade series generally and what it represents. I would say the first game and the third game are definitely the ones you would want to go to. My advice actually would be, if you want to get a bit of a flavor for it and you don't want to pay the full price, Torna is actually a really good entry point. I was recommending this to someone else in Discord who was asking about whether they should get into Xenoblade, but didn't know if the combat was going to be something they vibe with. And Torna is basically Xenoblade 3 combat, but not the same, just like very similar but not quite the same. It's also a lot cheaper and a lot shorter. It's like 20 hours long, like you can blast through it. It's also a self-contained story. You don't necessarily need to know about Xenoblade 2 to really get the most out of it. So Torna's a good place that I would point people to if they want to get a flavor for it, if they're not quite sure. But I mean, you just heard me last segment talk about how Xenoblade 3 I think is a fucking masterpiece, so I absolutely would recommend that if you have an interest in it and you want to check it out, then I definitely say that's a good thing to do. But I guess the core question is, have we got back into a series that we felt wasn't for you, or have we, are there games that we should love but we don't? Are there any of those that come to mind to you, Bally?
To my knowledge, and correct me if you can think of more, I think there's only like 3 games that I've properly played and bounced off on this podcast I can remember. And one of them I actually did, well, I didn't actually beat it. I got stuck on the final boss, so I guess it doesn't count. But it was Xenoblade X, like I mentioned. Fire Emblem 3 Houses, which again, I spent like 20 to 30 hours in before being like, oh, this just isn't for me.
Yeah.
And then the one I got to the final boss and just really didn't love was Bloodstained.
Yes. Ironically, all of those like some of my favorite games.
Turns out MZ loves all 3 of these.
Yes.
And I guess you were a big driving factor in me even attempting any of these 3 games, to be fair.
Yeah, because like you had like little to no experience with RPGs generally when you first started this show, and I was trying to like get you into them in like various ways. You actually did really love the first Xenoblade at the time anyway when you played it.
Yeah, I hadn't. I think I was young and naive. No, I'm joking. But I was like, I didn't have many experiences of like big epic video game stories at that point, and it is a very good epic story.
It's great, yeah. It's
even if I
fantastic.
do think some of the mechanics I struggled with a lot.
Yeah, totally, and that's part of the weak part of that game, which I think 3 really corrects.
Yeah, and I think that's something that game and maybe Bloodstained and other RPGs, and to an extent Fire Emblem sometimes, where I don't like getting myself into a situation, and this is across all games, I don't like getting myself into a situation where it's like, right, I'm against a boss or a difficulty spike, and I have to go away and do something else in order to better myself to come back and beat the spike. Right. I way prefer a God of War, Spider-Man, Kena Bridge of Spirits, where my action skills can get me out of a tricky situation. Like I can...
Right, you don't have to hit some numbers in order to get to
while all those 3 examples I just gave actually do have number mechanics, and every game now has RPG mechanics to a degree.
They're very like... They're not really RPG. Like, they're very, very
numbers that go
level,
up into armor and weapons, that's all I mean.
It's super surface level stuff.
Yeah, even though they have those aspects, by and large, with those types of games, you can still action skill your way out of those, and I that's way more my jam. Like Horizon Forbidden West, sure, you can go away and get all the weapons and armors and go and fight a big boss, or you can get a fraction of that and still go and fight the boss and still defeat it. And
I mean, that said, you did treat that game much more like an RPG from what you were saying. You did level up a bunch and things like that. I did,
and that's the balance where I need to feel that want to go and explore, and
you need to have side content that's interesting enough and
enjoy
stuff you actually want to do.
And I wasn't enjoying the loop of Xenoblade X or Three Houses in particular, and those are the things I needed to go away and do if I was going to have a better time with like the combat mechanics of those games. Same with Bloodstained. Like I was like, I could go and explore the castle more and get more powerful so I can fight this final boss, but also I really don't want to do that, but also I really don't want to fight this final boss. I think I'm going to put this game down. Just that kind of build up. And I gel way more with games that give me more options to get out of those situations, whether they're RPG or not, basically. And so a series that I didn't love and then really got into, though, is really tough. And I go back and forth on Fire Emblem. Like, I'm not turned off to Fire Emblem. Like, if a new Fire Emblem comes out and, in my opinion, has fewer, how do you put it, persona mechanics? I can't even think what's the right word of all that.
I don't think
guff they added to Three Houses.
Yeah, I wouldn't call... Because, like, the stuff in Persona that works is the relationship stuff, and I think there's a lot of, like, micromanagey stuff in Three Houses that isn't necessarily what I would call Persona, but is like, just micromanagey of, like, making sure that you water these plants or whatever, or, like, you go around and, like, have lunch with people, that type of thing. Where, like, the meat of the quote-unquote Persona stuff in Fire Emblem Three Houses is the support conversations, which are fantastic. Like, they're really good, and like every time those pop up, I think those really work. And I think you were more kind of having trouble with the kind of minutia of going around the
There was
area.
Just very long periods of time before I was going into my next strategy battle, which is kind of like why I like aspects of Fire Emblem is the strategy, and why I'm an Advance Wars fan, and ultimately why I should really play triangle strategy when I do get the chance, because I do enjoy turn-based tactics, and I can have some RPG level up in there as well, like Fire Emblem, and so I'm looking forward to this series maybe more getting back to its roots, but I don't know whether the next game will take the Three Houses idea further, or...
I don't know. Considering how successful Three Houses was, I feel like they might lean into it a bit more.
You think it was very successful and they'll copy it?
Oh, wildly successful. Yeah, people absolutely fucking love that game. Like, just across
So I guess I'm going to
be
be having a Fire Emblem break for a while. But
yeah, potentially. It depends what they do.
Same with like Xenoblade. It's very long, and when I have to absolutely love a game that I'm going to sink more than, say, 50 hours into, and I like Xenoblade. I like Xenoblade 1 a lot. I don't know if it's like in that top tier and makes me keen to play 2 or 3, and obviously I bounced off X. So yeah, series I didn't like but came back to. I really can't think of any, because I generally like most to, if not all, series, but then there's a handful that I've bounced off and maybe haven't gone back to.
Yeah. For me, in terms of ones that I feel I should love but don't, I mean, I think right back at you with a couple of these. Advance Wars is like, I should absolutely love Advance Wars. I really should. I just don't.
You
like
in
it
that
very
final
much.
level of 1, you were like, this is insane.
I hated I just really did not like it. It was. There are elements of that game that just feel really hard for me to get my head around. Like it feels like an endless war sometimes of like, well, I just send these guys out and then they get destroyed, but then I have to build them all the way on the other side of the map and it slowly takes them to get across. It's just, for me, it was a loop that I couldn't figure out and I never got my head around in a way that made sense. And yeah, it very much was like, I should love this. I love strategy games. I love turn-based strategy. I love like the complexity of it. But with Advance Wars, because there's not that kind of progression, because I can't RPG my way out of it, as you might say.
You like to RPG your way out of things.
I do, yeah, that's the thing. Exactly, yeah. I do like having overpowered characters that I've leveled up and are able to destroy things. Like, that's why whenever I played GBA Fire Emblem stuff, I used to play it on emulators at school on my laptop, right? And I would get to the arena. The arena is the place where, you know, it's a bit of risk-reward because you go into the arena and you could die because it's basically an endless back and forth until someone comes out the victor. And so you could lose a character there, but with save states, I was just like, I'm just going to go to the arena and grind everyone to level 20 and I'll have max level people. It'll be great. And that's what I did. I did that with the original Fire Emblem 7. I did it with Fire Emblem 6 a bunch, arena grinding, arena abuse all the time, because I just want to have powerful characters who are able to kick ass and destroy things. So I find it very difficult with Advance Wars where I can't do that.
Even Horizon Forbidden West has an arena you can abuse.
Yeah, there you go. See, it's a good thing for RPGs. You should always have one. But yeah, that I bounced off greatly. The other one was Okami. I should fundamentally love Okami. It is Zelda Twilight Princess, right? It is like that era of Zelda game. It should be exactly my jam. It should be like the combat
it's
and like
artistic. It's Japanese.
Dungeons. Yes. The themes, like all of the visuals, all that stuff, it should appeal to me directly. I think that is one of the most overrated games of all time. I think it's I think the game is totally fine. I think it is an average to middling Zelda game. It's dungeon. The thing it really frustrates me is that it thinks you're an idiot the whole fucking game. The game treats you like a child. It really does. Like, it doesn't let you figure anything out for yourself. It feels the need to like show you all these things. The dungeons themselves are fundamentally really poorly designed. They're not that interesting. There's not really any puzzles to speak of. The combat is extremely easy. You can spam it and win super, super fast without much issue at all. There's not a lot of friction points, and I don't know. I also just don't like Issun. I think he's the worst character ever written, maybe. Like, absolutely despise him. Like, people talk about Navi, and Navi is like a saint compared to Issun. Issun fucking sucks. So yeah, Okami is absolutely one where I really should, like, that should be a game I love, but I really do not like it very much at all. So it's a real shame, because, you know, it's one that people absolutely hold very, very close, and I think it definitely has a lot of cool aspects. Like, I do actually really love the way it looks. Like, I can't deny that. It's a beautiful, gorgeous game. Really stunning environments and the cel-shaded nature of it. Yeah, music's nice as well. Yeah, definitely. And yeah, it's just unique from a mechanic standpoint of like that kind of drawing on screen stuff, which I did have a little bit of finickiness with, of like just getting the drawings correct and stuff like that.
It's definitely not a perfect system.
It's not perfect, but it's a great idea. Yeah, I really like the idea of like drawing sun in the sky and then it does and it affects this thing. But again, I wish that they had done more interesting puzzle design around that, and they just don't. They have these things and they could do so much more with them, and they just ultimately fall flat. They don't really go anywhere. So yeah, that one stands out to me. In terms of ones that I thought I would like going in, like having the look of them and didn't really work, Rime is a good example of that. Now, keep in mind, I played the Switch version of Rime, which was a really bad port, like absolute garbage, so that might have affected my enjoyment of it. But it's ultimately like a very kind of chill platforming, like adventure kind of exploration-y. I didn't get to the end. Okay. No. Because
that game does get more linear and more puzzly and better in my view. As much as it didn't run well on my Xbox One either.
Yeah. It definitely has a kind of Eco Shadow of the Colossus vibe in a lot of senses, doesn't it? And I feel like I should... those are other games, I think, as well. Shadow of the Colossus is a great example of a game I feel like I should love. I haven't actually played it, so I haven't made the test yet. I'm not allowed to have an opinion, apparently. But I know in my heart of hearts that I'm going to start climbing in that game, and I'm going to be like, this feels like garbage. I don't want to play this. You know, like
go in knowing that the climbing will feel a certain way, and you'll have a better time.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, I think like that falls into those types of games. Like, they should be my shit. Like Last Guardian, like look at that. Like Rime and Last Guardian feel very similar in terms of the main character, especially. And like that type of like very kind of narrative light in terms of it's much more kind of silent storytelling in a way. And I do love that idea, but it feels like every time I try and get into one of those games or even attempt to, it just doesn't quite work for me. So yeah, that's definitely one. I would say another one is, and maybe you'd have the same thing, because I think, you know, you with Outer Wilds is me with Return of the Obra Dinn. I think we're both like similar with those games where I respect the shit out of Obra Dinn and what it's doing. I just don't think it's for me. I think I should really love like the open detective nature of it. Like I really enjoyed her story where I was like writing down notes and like trying to figure stuff out. Like I love that idea, that experience with Tunic as well. Like holy shit, with Tunic writing down on pieces of paper and stuff. Like I should love this kind of like figuring out this deep puzzle, this kind of intertwined knot. And yet Return to the Obra Dinn, there was something about it with just like the way that you could revisit scenes, the way you could like watch them through again, and it wasn't easy to do that stuff in a convenient manner, but also like it just felt a little too obscure, like the art style with the 1-bit aesthetic. It was hard to identify who people were for me personally, and just like knowing what the situation was, the timeline, fitting it all together. I really did, and I just couldn't get it to work for me. So that's one that I respect a whole amount, and I feel like I should love it, and so many people I know really love it, and you know, but it's just it didn't work for me. So yeah, Return of the Obra Dinn's a big one in that case, and yeah, I don't know if you feel the same way about Outer Wilds, Bally, because I feel like we kind of talked about that before.
Yeah, no, totally. I think Outer Wilds and I'd love you to try it again, like first person issues perhaps.
Yeah, that's the biggest problem for me.
Yeah, it's just a really, really impressive game, but I just could not get most of the puzzles, and as a result, lost a lot of the magic because I was having to use guides to like say, how does this link to this, and this goes to this, and it was just kind of like, right, okay, that was very cool if I had been able to work that out, but yeah, it's cool. You should definitely try it sometime.
Yeah, I'll see. I think it was on Game Pass maybe at some point. Maybe it still is. I'm not sure. I think
it was on and then off.
Okay.
I believe it's off at the moment, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, it might not have been on PC either, because that was during when PC and console was less aligned in terms of stuff coming out on it. I think is it still coming out to Switch? Has it come out on Switch? I think it got announced for Switch, right?
It's certainly out on Switch, I believe.
It's out on Switch now. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
That could be a version to check out. Maybe might help playing it handheld as opposed to.
I just can't believe we're almost at the end of this question, and you've not even mentioned Octopath Traveler, which I'm very pleased about. So.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. Would I put it in? Yeah, I guess I would put it in one that I should love but don't. I mean, there are elements of Octopath Traveler that I love, and you know, certainly combat music, all that stuff is fantastic. Yeah, I don't know. I think like maybe because Triangle Strategy came out and did more of what I wanted, I care less about being annoyed about Octopath Traveler, because they're kind of giving me what I want at this point in time. So
strange between Triangle Strategy and Live Alive. They've kind of got aspects of Octopath, and just kind of do different things with them. Which
definitely,
is
I guess that's probably a good answer for a series that I initially felt wasn't for. I guess HD not because
2D.
Yeah, no, maybe it is. But the thing is, I did feel like HD 2D was for me, and then Octopath Traveler was like, well, they didn't quite nail it with this, which was unfortunate. So, yeah, I don't know. In terms of series that initially felt weren't for me that I got into, I don't think I have that many examples of those, because I generally...
There's one to come, which is it's called Metroid Prime Trilogy, and you just need to try it. It's not, you're not into it now, but you'll try it, and you'll be like, wow, this is
my eyes will be open to the truth, and I will finally do it. I mean, in some ways, Xenoblade was kind of like this, where
it was a slow build.
It was a really it was partly just because I didn't have the right controller set up to begin with, and I just couldn't get past that spider boss, and so I just didn't play the game for a whole year. Was like, you know, I was just like, oh, I can't do this, and you know, this game sounds cool, and I want to get through it and play it, but I found it really hard to do, and yeah, obviously, eventually, it's now one of my favorite series and one of my favorite games of all time. So that's a massive turnaround.
But back then, you were like me; you hadn't played a ton of JRPGs, and you know, it's a lot of systems and
yeah, totally. It was very overwhelming. Like I'd just come off Skyward Sword. I was like a little Zelda boy. That was all I knew. So it was definitely
that fantastic Zelda game you've still got to go back to.
Look, don't you fucking hold that against me. I will finish Skyward Sword on Switch, you motherfucker. It's happening.
Look, Wind Waker, if it comes to Switch tomorrow, I'm playing through the whole thing in a heartbeat. But Skyward Sword, you're like, oh yeah, it's the best thing ever. I'm gonna not play it. Okay.
Look, there are too many video games, Valley. I'm playing Final Fantasy 14. Give me a break. That game's like 700 hours.
I think Skyward Sword is longer than you had remembered.
No, I don't think so. I'm at Sandship, man. That's like practically the end of the game.
That's practically halfway. Yeah.
It's over half. It's like 2/3 of the way through. I've got one more main dungeon, and then I've got to do the thing where you do the 3 things going down, which is kind of a bit of a grind. I've got to fight the guy on the whale. Spoilers for Skyward Sword. You fight a guy on a whale, and then the end. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. Probably about 2/3 of the way through. I'll get back to it. Don't worry, it's happening. I will finish Skyward Sword and talk about it on this podcast again. But yeah, I don't know that I have that many series that I initially felt weren't for me that I have gotten into. Maybe it's a thing to come,
We've learned our tastes a bit to the point where there's a lot of games we don't even bother trying because we think
we just kind of know,
we're not going to like that or something.
Yeah. Which I don't know can be to your detriment. I would say actually, you know what? In terms of like a genre, like first-person shooters, I think actually Overwatch is a great example where I saw Overwatch, and part of this is also the kind of first-person sickness thing of like I watched when Overwatch launched in 2016. I watched Giant Bomb play it a bunch, and I was like, oh, I kind of feel a little bit motion sick watching this. So I stopped watching it, and I was like, this probably isn't for me. And then they had the free weekend the year later, and yeah, and I fell in love within like half an hour. I was like, this is one of the best games ever made. So that was probably the biggest turnaround I've had in terms of something.
Do you remember which character you played as that it first clicked in the free weekend?
It was Mercy. It was playing as a healer in this shooter where I was like, wow, I don't even need to be like good at shooting. I don't even need to shoot. I can just heal people on my team. I was like, this is amazing. I love how like unique and different, because I'd never played.
You know what? That's actually why I really took to Winston. Was he doesn't really shoot in the traditional way. You jump and get close, and then he's got like an auto.
It just kind of does it for you, doesn't it?
So that's actually weird that's kind of a way it appealed to me when I had that kind of trial on Switch.
Exactly. Yeah. So that absolutely is. That's probably the best example I would say. Is like it's the game I've put the most hours into.
The first person shooter that took shooting out of the main part of the game.
Yeah, which I think part of the reason Overwatch has fallen off a bit is because it leaned a bit too much into the competitive side and has made that a bit too much of a focus. And I hope Overwatch 2 can fix that, because it was certainly something that I haven't picked up Overwatch in a while. It's been a while since I jumped into it. So and I used to play it pretty consistently on like a weekly basis. So
we'll get back in October. It's coming.
I hope so. But thanks for the question.
Our next question is from Chad in Lincoln, Nebraska. It says, hey guys, I spent some time this weekend playing the new Mario Kart tracks. I'm not terribly impressed with this wave, other than the beautiful ice effects on the Snowland track. Prior to that, I'd been playing Hades. One more run is never enough. So I had this ridiculous idea last night for a Mario Kart track that starts in Tartarus and works its way up to the surface. There would need to be a lot of cheap traps and maybe even changing pathways from one play to the next. Then it morphed into a whole separate game where your racers are the different gods, with that respective power-ups, but not sure how much mileage you could get out. I'm not sure how much mileage you could get out of that. So my question, what ridiculous Mario Kart mashups would you like to see? If you could pick any game to get the MK treatment, what would you pick? Keep up the good work.
I would take a Hades racer in a heartbeat.
That sounds like a great one. For sure.
Yeah, it's built for it, isn't it? All the gods, all of the characters, all the people in Tartarus that you chat with and have relationships with. I want to see what Dusa would race in. She's just a floating head. How does she control a cart? Or what is the thing that she races in?
I actually think a lot of the Mario Kart's a good example of a series where I reckon it's the hardware that has held back a lot of these crazy ideas to an extent where. When you have loads of racers on a screen, we've talked about this with like F-Zero X, like there is a limit on power on how much you can be doing with the background and the track around you when you have like 8 to 12 to 20 racers all doing their own thing.
Yeah, I mean, look at Fall Guys on Switch, right? You have to animate everyone at like 3 frames a second in order for it to run smoothly, do the stop motion thing essentially, because you can't have 60 players on that hardware.
So you probably need like a more powerful Switch before a lot of these ideas are possible. So sorry to kill everyone's party, but that's,
great, yeah.
That's probably where we're at. But yeah.
So yeah, do you have a series that you would give the Mario Kart treatment to, or a mashup that you would like to see? Obviously, we talked about Smash Kart for years and years, and it's the thing that we want the series to turn into.
For sure.
But what kind of like crossovers would you like to see?
I mean, I think God of War going through all the different realms would just be wild.
Similar to Hades in a way, right? Just that kind of mythological bent to it.
Yeah, and there's that like cutscene in God of War, like halfway through the first game, where you are going through like multiple realms, and it's just like, this is ridiculous. But something that ties Mario Kart into that, and you could just kind of going track to track to track. I like the idea of a wave race themed track, but here's the thing, is that you're literally driving underwater while the wave race jet skis are going on the surface, and they're going in tandem at the same time, and it's just kind of like this really nice visual effect that would make it just awesome.
Man, that's a great idea, like having them interact in some way as well, or like maybe you come up to the surface and you see them like jumping over you or whatever.
Totally.
Yeah, that's
and then
really cool.
That's where like you really do want the Smash Brothers fication of Mario Kart, where it's like a real nod, tip of the hat to like proper Nintendo franchises and of their past. The other one I'd want to see is a point-to-point track, and each lap or each point is a new entry in the series. So you could have the first lap is based on Mario 64, the next one is Mario Sunshine, the next one is Mario Galaxy, and you could do this across like multiple Nintendo games, or any game to be honest, where the track evolves to feature different games at each point to point. And again, it's just like this nod to gaming history, this nod to like all these crazy games that have come out, and yeah, I think that'd be awesome. And then finally, we'd been questioning in the first segment, like, what have the Mario Kart team been working on? What have Retro been working on? But in reality, both of them have still been working on Star Fox Grand Prix. And they're probably just waiting for the next Switch for it to be announced. So, like, that's what they've been working on for, like, 6, 7, 8 years together.
Cool. Okay, great. So, I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was thinking of like what Nintendo series with vehicles in them could you turn into a racer, and Advance Wars is certainly one.
That
right?
is a great show. Yeah,
you could definitely have. It would be a slow racer, like tanks crawling, and obviously you could have very easy weapons because they all have weapons on them and stuff like that. But like having the aerial stuff with the helicopters and the bombers and stuff like that, like maybe multiple planes of existence of like people in the sky but also on the ground at the same time. I think that could be a fun way to do it if you could figure out a way to get that to work and not break it, basically having simultaneously like land vehicles, sea vehicles, air vehicles all racing against each other at once. You'd probably have to split it up, I would imagine, into different like classes and races based on each of those, but yeah, it would be interesting because it would be the slowest pace racer of all time, just like really crawling through all these tracks and stuff. That would be a fun one, I do think. And I think you could do some really cool stuff with obviously Xenoblade very much on my brain all the time at this point in time, but the races in Forza that are this race is the entire fucking circuit of this map, and it's like a 30-minute race. Those like massive ones. My idea would be to have a race that is just the whole of the Bionis. You just like, you race through the entire thing and it takes like 6 hours to do. and you just like have this enormous fucking race that just
you could do like Breath of the Wild map or something as well.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. Totally, yeah. Just do the Forza thing, but go all the way around the Breath of the Wild map in that loop. Those races in Forza were just like exhausting in a way to me. They're stressful because it's like... Yeah. If you fuck up at the end, it's like, Jesus Christ, that's like a whole 25, 30 minutes just gone.
It's the second you cross the finish line, you can't rewind. You have to go just before the finish line. And as you get really close to the finish line, the rewind feature actually disappears. Like there's
Does
like
it?
a little window.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's
I was going to say, mentioning Breath of the Wild, RFN have had this it's a fun idea for a while, where the next Pilot Wings is going to be Pilot Wings Breath of the Wild, and it's just over the open world of Breath of the Wild in the same way that Nintendo recycled Woohoo Island for like a decade.
Yeah, I think that would be fun.
I would love that.
That'd be really, really cool. Yeah, generally a new Pilot Wings, you know, or like make Pilot Wings a racing series as well. Like that certainly is a thing you could do. It's really fun kind of stuff that you could adapt there that I think would make a lot of sense. In terms of like some of the historical stuff, I think Dragon Quest is a great series to lean on for that, because there's such deep, rich history of that entire lineage across the years, and so having a Dragon Quest track that like represents all the eras of Dragon Quest I think would be amazing, and like having the hero in there to represent that I think would be very, very cool. Yakuza in Yakuza Like a Dragon has a Mario Kart style minigame, so I think that's just, you know, it speaks for itself. Like you very easily adapt that. I think that makes a lot of sense. And then I was like, well, what other IP? Well, of course, Bally, we've got to have a Star Wars track in Mario Kart. That would be you know, racing around the Death Star. That's the thing that we could do.
We need to, or you need to find some potentially not legal means how to play like episode 1 racer. As when I say episode 1 racer, I mean the one with the big bubbly heads from episode 1. Do you remember this game?
Oh right, yeah. Was it on N64?
I think
that game, or was it PS1?
I think it might have just been PS1. I don't think it was N64.
Because there's the pod racing game that you played that was re-released on Switch, but there was another one, right?
Yes, I swear it's called like episode 1 racer.
I think, isn't episode 1 Racer the name of the one you played? I can't remember. We're gonna have to look this up. And
they've got very similar names.
Yes, yeah. Maybe was it like in an arcade or something? It wasn't an arcade thing, was it?
No, it's a game on.
I feel like there was a pod racing arcade thing at one point in time. It feels like it makes itself, doesn't it? Like
Super Bombard Racing.
Super Bombard Racing. So what was that on?
PlayStation 2.
Oh wow! Okay,
yeah,
interesting.
Came out in Europe in May 25th, 2001.
Well, Bally, last night I put down £4 on a deposit for a Steam Deck. So if that happens in like the next 5 months or whatever, then you know, I have means of playing PlayStation 2 games. Let's say potentially. So you know, that could be possible. I could check that out. That'd be fun.
It got a 2.5 out of 10 from Game Informer.
Amazing! Sounds like a great game. Let's get into it.
IGN 7.8. So
yeah.
Can't be awful.
Yeah, can't be terrible. Same game score as Mario Kart Double Dash. That's funny, that. Yeah. So yeah, lots of fun ideas I think that you could have with Mario Kart crossovers. You know, I think Rayman would be cool. You know, like stuff from the 2D games, having some of that represented in some way, like having a 3D stage that like had the art of the 2D games would be a really cool twist on it. And maybe a level that is based around rhythm, like those rhythm levels in Rayman would be a neat thing to do as well. There's definitely music courses in Mario Kart, but like having ones that are like explicitly about being on beat and on rhythm for certain sections, I think would be
actually neat. In Melody Motorway, and that's the better European names,
of course, superior
names, Melody Motorway, in its defense, when you are on a certain musical instrument on that track, it will play in time with the music of that track. So it'll be like, say you're drifting around the piano, it'll have like a little piano-y twirl that goes in line with the music at the time. So it's cool, fun. But it's slightly different to what you're suggesting. But
yeah. But yeah, I think there's loads of things you could do. I think there's loads of like fun crossovers, and I think inevitably what we do want is like, okay, so we've got the Splatoon characters in the game, let's get Splatoon courses in there, let's have Kirby in there, let's have, you know, my personal taste would be that you break away from just having karts and you kind of like lean more into the characters themselves and have, you know, if you're going to have Sonic in there, just have him running, you know, he doesn't need a vehicle to be quick, even though he is a part of a series where they literally put him in a car anyway. So, you know, they could certainly do that, but I think Nintendo have a rich enough stable of IP of like, I don't know, Bayonetta could just ride a dragon, you know? She doesn't need to use a cart. She can, you know, have some kind of eldritch beast that she's on top of or something like that, you know? Just adapt it to the IP as opposed to, you know, sticking so rigidly to this cart thing, which they're inevitably, I don't think, ever going to do. I think just they kind of are very set with it.
If they can at least do crazy tracks, I can give them a pass on the cart as much as I'd love to see Sonic just running Ronick.
Yes, Ronick. He shall now forever known be as Ronick. That's his half brother.
He runs, so he's Ronick. There
yeah, he's Ronick. That's
Logic.
Sonic who runs. Orange Sonic Ronick. He's a shout out to Ronick. He's my best friend. I love him. He's gonna be in Sonic 3, man. Yeah, it's gonna be good.
Yeah.
I do need to watch those Sonic movies. I feel like people say they're quite good.
I do too. The pressure is growing. We should try and watch them before the whatever this Mario film.
Are you going to go to the cinema and watch the Mario movie? Are we going to actually do this? Are we going to have a segment on the show where we discuss the Mario movie?
Yeah, I would like to. Going to a cinema for almost 3 hours with Bally Jr. seems like a daunting task.
Well, it will if it's coming out end of next year. Maybe I don't know how kind of
could it be Bally Jr.'s first film? Is that what we're?
I think that's the aim here is for it to be the first cinema experience is the Mario movie starring Chris Pratt for your child to go to. I think that's
Chris Pratt will be his new favorite actor.
Of course, how could he not? Like, what an icon, what a legend.
Are we getting a trailer this year?
Oh man, I don't know. I don't think so.
I feel like
it'll be later.
Spring next year.
Yeah. It tends to be kind of shortish cycles for those things, I think so. Okay. Yeah, well, let's plan for that. Let's see if that can happen. I look forward to it. But yeah.
Yeah. Thanks very much for your email, Chad. That was a fun one to cover. But that's all we've got time for emails on this segment, on this episode. But join us after the break where we are going to be chatting through a little bit of news.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the third and final part of today's show. It's time to get into some juicy news. It's not that juicy.
Juicy.
It's like I don't know, mildly wet news. I don't know. It's okay.
They're not giving us, these big cross game directs, so we get the little ones.
The nuggets, yeah, the little pieces,
little piddly ones
that are very targeted at specific communities, which I think there's a benefit to it, there's a drawback to it, right? Like the Xenoblade 3 Direct, if you're not interested in that, you're not going to watch it, so you just won't know anything about it. It won't be for you necessarily. Versus if they had Xenoblade information in a Nintendo Direct, they have a captive audience, right? They have you, and so they can feed you your vegetables and maybe get you interested. Which I think, even in this case, the Pokemon Company kind of acts like that as well, ironically. Obviously, so we're going to be talking about the Pokemon Presents that happened, but also the Splatoon 3 Direct. And I think specifically in the case of the Pokemon one, they very much are like, we're going to shove some fucking vegetables down your throat before we give you the pudding, right? Like,
yeah.
They save the Scarlet and Violet stuff right for the end, and they give you a whole bunch of fucking bullshit beforehand that nobody cares about. In fact, a lot of people, I'm sure, do care about it. I'm sure there's loads of people. I mean, Pokemon Go...
It makes you remember that, oh my god, there's like a whole Pokemon world going on below the surface of like the big main entries where there's just game upon game upon game, loads of communities... all these things need updates. Let's check in with every single one of them, kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And like sometimes we're like, oh wow, like these things, like Fire Emblem sold 3 million copies, and like, wow, Nintendo, they really, they're getting these franchises, they're getting quite big now. And then you realize, oh, something like Pokemon Unite, which is this throwaway thing in this Pokemon presentation, probably has more players than any Fire Emblem game in the entire world will ever have in its entire lifespan.
Yeah. We were talking about Steam Deck on the last show, and I think one thing we maybe forgot to mention was, oh yeah, Nintendo are going to have this handheld with Pokemon, therefore, they're going to have an automatic 15, 20 million extra.
Yeah. It's basically like if you release a Pokemon game, it will be in the top 10 selling on Switch, just by default. Because there's by default 10 million people that will just buy it, right?
Yeah.
That's probably without any marketing. Just like 10 million people will just buy it.
And they'll buy it damn quick as well. It won't be over like 3-4 years. It'll be like within that quarter, you know?
Yep, it'll be like 1 month, 10 million people bought this.
Yeah.
Cool. That's Pokemon. It's just like, it's absolutely staggering the size. So like something like Pokemon Unite gets a little update here. Like Pokemon Unite has more players than anything that you can imagine probably. Like it's absolutely absurd, especially in places like China where it's like those types of MOBAs are massive. It's absolutely huge. So yeah, as little as we care about that stuff, there's a lot of people out there who are playing it. You know, it's like one of those silent majority things, right? Like, why was Arcane such a massive success? I think partly because it's a fucking incredible show. Like, probably the best video game adaptation ever made, and not even a contest. Like, it's absolutely fucking astonishing. But also, the League of Legends audience is like half the globe, so of course it was going to be somewhat of a success because that audience is absolutely staggeringly large. So yeah, it's definitely, it's a whole other world, Valley, that we don't even pay attention to, and yet it's most people who play video games play like League of Legends, and that's all they play. So in any case, let's get to the actual dessert, which is Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, which they showed a decent amount of. There's some fun things going on here. One of the things that I really like about it from a kind of structural standpoint is they have said it's open world, which they didn't say about Arceus, interestingly enough. Even though Arceus was pitched almost like that, they never called it an open world game.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's because it's more structured like Monster Hunter, where it's open, but it's split into zones, right? So when you leave the area, you go into a big zone, and the zone feels like an open world, right? It's big enough to be called one, but they are split apart from each other. One of the frustrating things about Arceus was if you wanted to go from one zone to the other, you would always have to go back to the main camp and then load back out to another area, which I always thought was a bit stupid. I wish you could just fast travel between the zones, but it never lets you. Whereas here, it feels like it's going to be more open in the same way that Breath of the Wild is, where the whole map is open to you and there's no loading zones between areas, basically. So you can just kind of keep exploring from one side of the world to the other, essentially. So I think that's why they're calling it that in that sense. And of course, they're kind of changing up the structure with the gyms, which means that the gyms are not the main focus anymore. They're one focus of like a 3-part thing, which they haven't talked about the other 2 parts yet, but it feels like they're going to have these like kind of 3 elements to the game. They call it the treasure hunt. Like there's this guy at the beginning, there's a bunch of voice acting in the beginning, and people are like, oh, is it going to have voice acting? No, they confirmed there's no voice acting in this game. Will Pokemon ever have voice acting?
It's interesting that something as major as gyms in the previous games would come under a name like treasure hunt in this game.
Yeah, so like I don't know what the treasure hunt involves. It's like I don't understand. Maybe you're getting something from beating the gym leaders that like plays into that, but it feels like these 3 different tracks, these 3 different things you can do, make it a little bit more interesting, because it's not just the gym challenge as the main focus, which it always has been, but having a couple of other things that you can go do as like different, maybe one's more story focused and one's, I don't know, adventure-y in a different way, exploration focused. I have no idea what they're going to do with those, but I'm sure they all kind of fit into different realms of what Pokemon games do. And the other thing is you can do gyms out of order, right, which I think we knew already, but I think it's nice to get confirmation of that, of like, yeah, we can kind of go around.
Interesting how that will work with like level ups and things and gating, and yeah, we'll see.
I have heard that they aren't kind of scaling it, because what you might expect them to do is to say, okay, well, you got to this gym first, so we're going to start it at this level, and then the next one that you get to will kind of be in line with where you should be, you know, like scaling alongside you. But it sounds like, no, you could just run into a gym where it's like a very high level Pokemon and you can't really do anything, which I feel kind of takes away the point of doing them in any order, because then you can't really, because then you're not high enough level. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see how they do it.
If you do choose to go out of order and manage to defeat like this much more difficult gym leader, you've still got the sort of boring having to go to the easier gym leader later.
Right.
You know, it's like it's a lose-lose.
Exactly. It's a little bit weird. But I think the most interesting change for me is that seemingly you're getting the legendaries from the very beginning, or at least the Pokemon that are on the box, which I would assume are the legendaries. They're basically they're basically your transport system throughout the game. So obviously everyone was like, why do they have these weird tires in their chests when they were first revealed? And it turns out they can turn into a motorbike, or at least one of them turns into the motorbike. The other one has 2 wheels but still runs on all 4s for some fucking reason. So that's very strange. But they showed off a few different traversal things, like very Breath of the Wild inspired, where I think Corridon, the red one, can like climb up walls with its hands, very much like climbing stuff.
I love the idea of open world Pokemon, but does the transportation method just have to be so derpy? Like, it just...
I like it,
They
personally.
just look so lame.
It feels very Digimon-esque, doesn't it? Like,
It
transforming
does quite, yeah.
into different... Especially Miraidon, I think, which is the more future-y, techie one, very much feels of that vein. I personally, I like how dumb they look. I like the designs. I think that it's silly, but also I like that instead of just like, oh, you went to the bike shop and got a bike... Like, it's bringing the utility of Pokemon more into the world, which I think the thing I liked about Arceus was just, like, seeing them in the wild and doing weird stuff, interacting with each other, and, like, having a bit more utility, like, having them as these transport systems, makes you feel a bit more connected to the Pokemon themselves, as opposed to just having, you know, some generic glider, right? Like, I thought it was much cooler that I was flying with Braviary in the sky in Arceus than having,
I'm all up for
like
that. I
Yeah.
just think that these specific legendary designs with like the wheel in the chest and that all just looks a bit ridiculous. But
I mean, at this point in time, how many there's like 1,000 Pokemon. Like, they can only go so far with designs.
how do you there's only so many cool Pokemon you can make. I
right?
get that.
Yeah.
I got that.
I personally really like them. I think they're dumb in a good way. And like you can transform them into kind of planes almost as well, kind of gliders, kind of planes, kind of bikes. And it feels like they'll probably have a water transformation as well, where they'll go in the sea and you can go across and that.
I'm intrigued how they link to the story if you're getting them so early, and how all that's going to link and work.
Yeah, my assumption would be either there are other legendaries that kind of come up later in the game, because Pokemon can't resist that. They have to have some kind of generic legendary story going on. Or there's some kind of thing tied in with these Pokemon where they will evolve as the story goes through. So you kind of start with the basic version of them, and they like evolve into the more legendary versions as you go through, and eventually by the end like become the legend of the game. And I think probably, I mean, as always usually happens, like you'll have one at the beginning, but then you'll fight the other at the end, and you'll be able to get the other one at the end. Probably makes a lot of sense of what they would do with it. But yeah, some other stuff that they showed, a bit more of the co-op online stuff, which is really cool. Like the idea of having 4 players all together exploring the world at the same time. I feel like there's going to be some limitations on that. Obviously in Sword and Shield you could have people show up in the wild area, but it basically killed the frame rate. Like, it absolutely destroyed the kind of performance of the game, and you couldn't even interact with people. It was mainly just seeing them go around, but then you could do raid battles with people out in the wild area, whereas this is far more like fully baked in of you can just get 4 friends together and just ride around on your fucking bikes. That was a funny moment where they're all just like, all right, roll out, and we're on our fucking Pokemon bikes and going into the distance. I thought that was pretty cool. And I think this is going to be a big thing for a lot of people, because, you know, multiplayer has been always a core important part of the Pokemon franchise, but it's always been like you're trading or you're battling against each other. There's never been a kind of like cooperative exploration, kind of like playing at the same time Pokemon game. And I think if they can get this right, I think it will be a really big deal. And it'll get them even more sales, because what tends to happen with multiplayer games is that people will drag their friends into it. They'll be like, hey, look, I'm playing Pokemon, you got to play with me, and other people will buy it as a result of that, you know. Very much a thing that I think is going to add to their advantage, and if they can do it right. But again, there's no evidence to suggest they can do it right, so I think I'm a little bit more skeptical. But of course, the other thing that they talked about was the gimmick of this game. I don't know how you feel about these gimmicks, but like, every time they come up, I'm like, can we just leave them alone? Like, yeah. I just don't.
Let's have like new Pokemon as gimmick enough in itself. Like that's exciting enough, and these new legendaries, and like we're opening up the world, right? But we also have to have like Pokemon made of crystals, and it's just like, why? And it's very eye rolly for me.
Yeah, I don't like them. I think ever since Black and White was the last time that they didn't really have one of those, and after that it was like there's megas, then it's Z moves, then it's Giganta Dynamaxing. Now it's terrestrializing, what the fuck they're calling it. And I'm like, all of these...
I blame anime. That's what I blame.
All
anime.
of these things are basically the same thing. Also, you can't take anime's name in vain. Come on. We've got Xenoblade Chronicles 3 here. Look, give anime respect.
I think there's good and bad that comes with anime, and this is the bad side, where everything has to be the bigger than the last thing, you know?
Yeah, but it's always the same thing of it's like, well, what's the thing that it does? Oh, it just makes them more powerful. Like, that's basically every time. Yeah. It's just, there's nothing in, it's like, okay, it's a visual distinction, but really at the end of the day, what does it mean? Oh, they've got better stats, they're just more powerful. Which is just, first of all, it's a pain in the ass for the fucking competitive community, which always irks my personal taste, because I always want to have more interesting, fresh stuff on the competitive scene, and just throwing these things in, they're immediately going to get banned, and there's not even any reason to use them. But also, like, looking at Arceus and what Arceus did. Arceus didn't have a gimmick. Like, Arceus's quote-unquote gimmick was just redesigning the way you approach a Pokemon game. And that is so much more interesting to me than anything else. Like, there was a slight change to the battle system where you have, like, the fast moves and the slow moves. Like, the faster moves where you get, like, more turns in the order, a bit more like a traditional RPG. And the more powerful moves that you can only get one turn with them, but then your opponent might get more turns because you've done a big hit, that type of thing. So it's, like, a little bit of a change, but it's not a gimmick. It doesn't feel like, it more feels like an addendum to the battle system, as opposed to, well, now they're giant. Anyway, that's it. I just don't like it, and I continue to think it's stupid. But I don't know. It's not like they have any reason to change what they're doing, because Pokemon continues to sell more and more every single time it happens. So there's diminishing returns, but I think as long as people buy these games, we're never going to get voice acting in a Pokemon game. We're never going to get, like, the big budget stuff. And this is a good step forward, right? Like, the fact that Arceus happened, I think, is great. And the fact that this is leaning into more open world, as being a bit more ambitious, is great. There are still a lot of things the Pokemon series is behind on and is still dragging its feet on. And ultimately, maybe it can do that, because still, at the end of the day, let's be honest with ourselves. This is a series squarely aimed at 10-year-olds. It still is. It always will be. It will always be aimed at the 10-year-olds that exist when the game comes out. And everybody else are just old people with nostalgia glasses on, trying to hang on to some semblance of, like, innocence.
Just waiting for Pokemon Stadium to come to Nintendo Switch Online. That's us.
Yeah, just like hoping to recapture the magic of their childhood. I'm here to tell you, yes. You will never do it again. I'm sorry, Pokemon will never do that for you.
Hey,
again.
I think the Pokemon Snap game that came out last year did a good job of that. It was nostalgia, it appealed to new people, it did a nice hybrid of both, and I think generally they're quite good at doing the hybrid.
Yeah. But you will always be a sad, lonely old person who never loves anything again. That's my promise to you. Anyway, I thought it was good to see a bit more of it. But ultimately, it's coming out in November, I think, and I'm sure they'll ramp up the marketing cycle and spoil a bunch of Pokemon, and everyone will get mad about it. I'm going to do exactly what I did with Sword and Shield, which is ignore all the marketing and go in as blind as possible. Had a fantastic time going into Sword and Shield, not knowing any of the Pokemon. It was a delightful experience, right? Like, as kids, we always knew what Pokemon were going to be in the next game. We were so obsessed with it. We didn't care about any of that other stuff. We're just like, I want to know what's going in. And because I don't have any real interest in, like, the core mechanics of Pokemon from a, like, design standpoint anymore, it's just, again, I see the ones and zeros in the Matrix. Because a competitive Pokemon broke my brain, I can't derive enjoyment from just regular playing against NPCs anymore. So I have to find some way of finding enjoyment in Pokemon, and my way is to ignore all the marketing and get surprised at the weird Pokemon that pop up when I play.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm going to do.
They stick the landing on this open world stuff. I think that's the difference that'll probably push me over the line to buy this game. If reviews are just like, this is more Pokemon, and they actually did a really good job of doing a fully fleshed out open world that makes the whole formula more interesting, that's like green light for me to definitely dive in. If they're like, yeah, the open world is pretty take it or leave it, and it's basically a bog standard Pokemon game underneath that veneer, then I'll be a bit less keen, but we'll see. I have hopes, and hopefully the game is good, so we'll see how that goes. Bali, they also put out a Splatoon 3 Direct that happened the other day. I think both of us coming into Splatoon 3 are a bit like, yeah, we'll buy it, but I don't know. It feels like we're in a place where Nintendo have settled into the iteration sequence of Splatoon, which is ironic given how fresh of an idea it was to begin with. Yeah, so And a lot of this isn't Splatoon's fault. It's just honestly how the industry has evolved and also how my personal tastes have evolved. Like since Splatoon 1 came out, I've gotten into Halo and Overwatch, and like those are, and Apex Legends to a degree. And those are kind of like, all of them are either Game Pass or free to play. And the model, as you say, where multiplayer is so much more iterative than single player games. And as a result, because they're so iterative, it makes it tougher to get excited about the next wave. But I think the way around getting excited about the next wave is that games like Overwatch 2, for me, I'm still excited about it because I know I'm not dumping 50, 70 quid on it. I know it's just going to be there free to play, and
well, it depends how deep they get you with skins and battle pass.
Well, that's also I'm still a battle pass virgin, so I'm prepared to like hold out. I'm going to hold out on battle pass stuff. Probably we'll see. Overwatch might get me, who knows? But I think once you are into the realm of iteration, plus the fact you have to buy a 50 quid game, there's very few games that are like that. Like Call of Duty is a good example. FIFA, where they are almost like a hybrid of the pay 50, 70 quid day one, but also here's all this games as a service bollocks to go along with it. Yeah. And I think the danger is that Splatoon might be closer to those games necessarily than they are to, say, an Overwatch, Halo, or Apex Legends. And that's concerning. And that's what sucks a lot of the excitement I have for this game. Because I know it, like 50 quid for a game that's very iterative on Splatoon 2 feels like a lot of money, even though I think some of these improvements look good. I think the biggest downside is that there's no like new big mode that's not a card game,
Yeah, I mean, to that point, I was listening to NWR's Connectivity podcast, and they were talking about the idea of stuff like Call of Duty and stuff like that. But the difference is that those games are annualized, right? And so it makes sense that they're iterative every time because they have to put them out every year. I would be more forgiving of Splatoon 3 were this like Splatoon 6 and it was an annualized thing that came out every year.
And I didn't play years.
And I didn't play them every year and I just played one every 4 years or whatever, right? But it taking 5 years to make one and it being this iterative, it feels bad in that way of like it took you this long and it's just kind of the same thing again without a huge amount of change. The only new thing is like a card game where you kind of put things down on a map. Like Salmon Run looks exactly the same, the map looks exactly the same, there's a couple of new enemies, but yeah, I think I would be a lot more forgiving if it was an annual franchise and this was the level of kind of growth you saw between entries. But 5 years and it feeling pretty similar is, I don't know, man. It doesn't feel great. And there's certainly some things, as you were mentioning, things to get excited about. I think some of the new weapons look good. Like that katana looks great. The kind of paint katana and the kind of they've got the hamster ball, a few other new weapons that like the bow and arrow I think is pretty neat. I think that's new. I'm not sure, but yeah, there's definitely elements of this that feel like, okay, this could have just been a yearly update. This like it to more than anything, it feels like Splatoon should just be a platform like all these other games, right?
Just roll. Honestly, I would feel 10 times more excited about this thing if the entire thing was just rolled into Nintendo Switch Online, and they were like, if Nintendo, if your shareholders, the number one thing they want right now is to drive up Nintendo Switch Online users, then just roll it into. And the downside is, like the COD or FIFA comparison, like you have to have Nintendo Switch Online plus buy the £50 game. Like it's the double whammy. So I guess that's what pleases the shareholders, but it's just it doesn't feel like good value. Nintendo infrequently feel like good value. I'm not trying to say that Nintendo is the best value gaming company. They are
far from it.
High quality, good value. It's like there's rarely good value, but yeah, it just feels, when it's so iterative, it just doesn't feel great.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm going to play this, but I have my expectations tempered. I think also I was expecting a lot more focus on single player stuff out of this presentation, and
it was like a minute.
They showed like a brief glimpse of some stuff that's like going to be in same. And here's the thing, right? Here's what they said about the single player. They're like, if you are a new fan of the Splatoon game which of course they always have to say the Splatoon 3 game.
It's a game.
The Splatoon 3
the
game.
film's coming next year, but for now,
here's
the game.
Shout out to the Kit and Krista podcast for talking about why they do that, which is like basically it's legal stuff. It's like defending copyright type of stuff, but Nintendo just go over the fucking board with it. But anyway, they're like, if you're a new fan, you can learn the ins and outs of how to play Splatoon. So like they treat the single player like basically a tutorial for multiplayer stuff. Again, like they really could lean into some really interesting stuff.
I think that was one area that, while it was annoying they kept the live system for 2, I think the new bosses in 2 made the single player quite a big step up. Right. Remembering as well that 2 introduced Salmon Run and a bunch of weapons. Like the jump from 1 to 2, even though it was only 2 years apart, is just so much greater than 2 to 3 so far. And that's ridiculous considering 2 to 3 is a 5-year gap and 1 to 2 is a 2-year gap. It's pretty naughty.
I think COVID definitely has a big effect, though. It's, Nintendo clearly have been massively affected by it, so I think that probably makes a reason why. But still, even then, it's it also like Nintendo just don't approach the kind of games as service thing in any kind of modern way, where they're like, and we'll have updates for 2 years. And you know that's what they mean. It'll be 2 years and then they'll just abandon
regardless
it.
of whether it's the most successful game on the planet or it sells 100,000 units, they're just going to be 2 years.
Yep. And that's it. And that's all we'll do. And we're not going to extend that. No matter how well it does, no matter if it makes sense or anything, we're just going to... Yeah, it really does suck. And
they're just shooting themselves in the foot because, again, say this was a cheaper game or free to play, and it was games as service, and they could go way longer than 2 years, and they could make way more money long term. But it's just this short termist kind of 50 quid, buy it day one. Oh yeah, and we're going to do 2 years of support. It's a poor showing.
Yeah, I think really the reason that I would jump into this and not to Splatoon 2 is that the people playing Splatoon 2 now are fucking overpowered, incredible people.
Yeah, we'll have the fun of playing some noobs day one, and that will be fun.
Exactly. As soon as we jump into it and we start, like, it's more of a level playing field. Every time there's a new version, it levels things out, which is why it was nice when Fall Guys went free to play, because it just leveled the playing field, so you could jump in and have a much easier time. And eventually, obviously, communities will kind of whittle away, and only the few remaining will be the hardcore people left, but at least it gives you a nice jumping in point to do that stuff. So yeah, I look, here's the problem, is that fundamentally Splatoon is a fantastic
game. Splatoon 1 and Splatoon 2 are both incredible games, and they deserve a heap of praise. And if a formula isn't broke, why fix it? And it is going to be a strong formula. This game is going to sell well. It will review well. I think people will like it a lot. I think it's just when you're an old stalwart Nintendo fan like us, it's like we need that extra. It's scratched sometimes.
You just want a bit more, more, and they're just not doing it. And again, like, so many things that you look at and you're like, well, I guess they're going to have the same map rotation thing that nobody likes, but they're still going to do it.
They're going to have the live system on the single player, apparently. Like, you could see it in the top left of the screen, like the little lives. It's like, for God's sake.
Yep, they're going to bring back the app for some fucking reason that hasn't been used in years for anything, but because Splatoon 2 did it, well, let's do it again. Let's just keep bringing back these things just because they were done for tradition. And always, Nintendo's most interesting games are the ones that break away from tradition and do something different. Look at Breath of the Wild, look at Mario Odyssey getting rid of lives, like, what an innovation for the Mario series. Like, finally they made that decision.
But Splatoon was the breakaway innovative thing, but it still has lives. It's just the most frustrating thing.
Super, super fucking backwards in a way that I don't understand, but Nintendo, we love them, but they will continue to frustrate us in myriad ways. And I'm looking forward to jumping in and playing it, but I don't know. Tempered expectations, I'll say, is what it's going to be for me when it comes to Splatoon 3. And if they do another one of these, I don't know if I'll pick it up day one if it ends up being the same again. They really do need to do something different, and if they don't, then I don't know. I feel like people will still buy it and it will still be successful, but it will fall into the side of Nintendo that I am the least fan of, which is the franchises that just kind of do the same thing every time they release a new video game in that series. So there you go. Splatoon 3. I'm sure it'll be good.
It will be.
Yeah. I guess, Bally, just a quick question. Generally on the way Nintendo have approached announcements this summer, how do you feel about it? Do you think it makes sense for what they've got? do you think it would have made sense to have a direct with all this stuff that we've seen so far, including the Xenoblade stuff, the Splatoon stuff, the Pokemon stuff?
Yeah, I mean, had they had any information on Breath of the Wild 2, I think they would have done something. There's definitely enough there where they could have done a direct, but the fact
they did the Bayonetta trailer out of nowhere as well, right? They just kind of dropped that release date trailer on Twitter as well.
Between Splatoon info, Bayonetta trailer, the Pokemon stuff, like there's enough there. If they wanted to do a half-hour, 45-minute summer direct, they could have. It makes me think that there's something grander and wider happening. Could be COVID related, could be all to do with Breath of the Wild 2, could be something else, but they are just like, you know what, we're going to roll out these games for 2022. We know when they're coming out. We're confident about those dates. We're confident about those games. I think they have no confidence about 2023. And I think if they had some confidence, we would have seen something. I'm struggling to believe Breath of the Wild 2 is coming out spring 2023. I'm starting to struggle to believe it's going to come out autumn or winter 2023 at this point.
Okay.
Like if you compare it to Breath of the Wild 1 and the way that they roll out Zelda, like we had a full playable demo, well, not for people, but people at E3 back in 2016 for a game that came out on Switch 2017 in spring. And I know that was tied in with a console launch, but there's something fishy going on. Don't really know what it is. Maybe they're tying it into a Switch Pro or some powered up Switch that's coming out at a similar time to Breath of the Wild 2. I somehow doubt that, but aside from that, I think we have very little idea what's going to be Nintendo's 2023, and I don't think they really know much more than we do, to be honest. Is what it feels like.
Yeah, I'm slightly different. I do think that there's the possibility that we get a September or October Nintendo Direct that lays things out for
Game
2023.
Awards?
I don't know. I feel like Nintendo have kind of moved a little bit away from the Game Awards over the last few years. They've not really had that much interesting to show or say there. Last year they didn't have anything, did they? So it was, I feel like a little bit of they kind of don't have anything that they want to give Keighley at the moment, maybe. But if they were to do Zelda and they didn't have a September Direct, then I could see, because that is the one thing that has kind of been consistent with them, is showing Zelda stuff at the Game Awards. It's a possibility. But that's not a full marketing beat behind that. That's always been like two people in a chair playing the game, right?
True.
Like that's always been what that is.
I mean, do you think if we don't see anything Breath of the Wild 2 in 2022 that it's still spring 23? Or are you confident we will see something Breath of the Wild 2 in 2022?
I don't think it can be. If we don't see anything in 2022, then it can't be spring 2023. That's just not quick enough a turnaround for their marketing cycle. It just doesn't make any sense. So I would say, like, start to get worried if there's no September Direct, or if in the September Direct there is no Breath of the Wild 2. If they don't talk about it in the September Direct, it's not coming out until earliest end of next year.
I would bank that we will get a September Direct, and it won't include Breath of the Wild 2, and it'll be light stuff. It'll be, let's look more into the games still coming out this year. It might be one new game drop for spring next year. That'll be, I don't know, you were talking about like a rumored F-Zero or something new.
Yeah.
Something new, but
Advance Wars finally coming out.
Advance Wars coming out. But yeah, and like, updates to Nintendo Switch Online, maybe like a new console on those or something.
Yeah, that makes sense. People talking about Game Boy stuff.
Totally. I think that's definitely coming September, October, but I'm still skeptical that'll include anything Zelda related, but we'll see.
Yeah. So, I think there's reason to be hopeful.
They filled out 2022 with very few directs, which is quite weird and unique in and of itself.
Yeah, and honestly, I would say 2022 from their perspective has been really strong.
Kirby was a huge hit. That was kind of unexpected.
Yeah. Kirby was amazing. I love Triangle Strategy. Obviously, Xenoblade is like incredible.
Live Alive.
Live Alive, Bayonetta is coming out. Splatoon 3 is coming out. Like, it's
Rabbids.
Rabbids is coming.
It's a big year.
And there was Arceus at the beginning. It's a really strong year. So I don't know. I do feel like, people are a little bit maybe annoyed that there's no direct stuff, but like in terms of the games, they're really doing a good job. Like, there's a lot
and like you said before, it's that type of quote unquote Nintendo fan who just wants Mario and Zelda, and everything else is not good enough. And
which I just don't understand. It's
which is frustrating. And as much as I think Mario and Zelda are a tier above a lot of the stuff we've talked about, there's still so much good stuff this year.
I mean, you just know they're very much a fair weather like Nintendo person.
And you're allowed to be fair weather if you want, if you want to be, but don't pretend that Nintendo aren't putting stuff out when they really are. Exactly.
Don't be annoyed about it, because Nintendo are doing a lot of stuff, a lot of fantastic games coming out this year. So, yeah, that makes sense. Cool. Well, I think, Valley, that is going to do us. That is going to close us out for today's show. But there's some things we should talk about before we get on out of here. Most of all, people who support us directly on Patreon. And you can go over to patreon.com/ThisNintendoLife, where you can throw a couple of bucks our way and get some shows and some bonus stuff that we do. It's a good, fun time. And Bally, we would like to thank some of our patrons.
Yes, thank you to our $10 tier patrons. They are Zach S., Atari, Alex, Thomas, Matthew, and Albert. Thank you for your $10 tier support. And thank you to all of our other patrons. We hugely appreciate the support you give the show.
If you want to hear me rave about Power Wash Simulator, that was in our latest episode.
If you want to see me do incredibly well at MBZ's Jeopardy quiz that you gave me,
sorry.
Yeah, you can go check out that most recent episode of this Nintendo Life.
Yeah,
you can get all the episodes for $1.
I should look into some balance changes on my Jeopardy quizzes.
I will get my revenge.
Yeah, I look forward to that. That's going to be a fun time.
I've got a title for the category already. Do you want to know what it's going to be?
Is it the geography category?
It's MBZ around the world.
Oh, good. Okay, great. I'm looking forward to getting all those wrong because, as everyone knows,
I might even have another category, and it's called 200cc.
Oh no! I don't even know what you'd put in that, but maybe just racing questions, I guess. That probably makes sense. I look forward to Bally getting his revenge. Basically, we did a Jeopardy thing on the latest Patreon show, and I made a quiz that I was like, oh, this is, doable. And then, I don't know, I think I misjudged Bally's knowledge. But, come on, Bally, I thought you would know the name of the protagonist of Gears of War by this point in time,
Yeah, that's a blank spot in my memory. I don't have any defense for that one.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we'll wrap back around on that. But you can support us if you would like to and get some more nonsense like that. It's a good fun time. You can obviously find us in various other places across the internet. We're on Twitter, where we're rambling. Mainly, I still continue to only tweet about Xenoblade exclusively. So if you want to follow me and just listen to that, that's great. But you can follow me at LordNBZ. Where can they find you, Bally?
Find me on Twitter at Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN91.
Fantastic. You can also find the podcast Twitter at TNL Podcast, where we will post, when shows go live and also when our Patreon episodes go live, all that sort of stuff. So you can keep up to date and find out what is going on with us. If anything happens with the feed, those types of things, we'll update you over there. You can obviously join our community on Discord, which is a great place to go. Again, if you are playing Xenoblade 3 right now, lots of people in there obviously playing it right now, and a few people who have beaten it. So if you want to go in there and post your theories or thoughts, or want to ask people questions, or talk about spoilery stuff, there are people who have finished the game in there, and myself included, and I will be more than happy to chat with people about that. It's a really fun thing about games like this, where you can kind of dig deep into the story and kind of talk about moments that happened and that fun stuff. So yeah, go ahead and join our Discord and chat with people about a bunch of different stuff, and it's a good time. Link in the description for that, as well as our YouTube channel, where we post the video version of the show as well. But if you want to get it on your device, your phone, your fruit-based device, as certain podcasts say, you can download us. You can find us on various podcasting apps. But you can also find us on Stitcher, on Spotify. Of course, if you would review us on Spotify, that would also be great. Love seeing some more reviews go up on there. That'd be helpful to get us out to a bit of a wider audience, more people listening to the show, which is always a good thing. Always nice to hear from new people writing in, and also from people finding the show. So go ahead and do that and find us and subscribe. And I think that is pretty much going to do us, Bally. I think, man, it's still stupidly hot here, and it's weird. When I'm playing Power Wash Simulator, I actually feel cooler. It's a weird trick it does to my brain, where I'm spraying the water around. I'm I have my fan on me. I'm like, it's okay. I'm doing okay with the summer's day with this Power Wash.
Yeah,
it's kind of helping me. So yeah, I would recommend it. So if you want to cool down a little bit, but yes, I think I'll continue to play Xenoblade probably for another 50 hours.
I'll hopefully finish up Live Alive.
And yeah, I'm looking forward to some of these releases coming out at the end of the year that we'll be chatting about. And
we can play Splatoon with the community. Looking forward to that.
Yeah, that'll be a good thing to do as well. So we'll do that, and we'll continue to make this podcast happen, and it will continue to be a fun thing. And we'll see you soon when we do one in a couple of weeks' time. Until then, thanks for listening. See you next time. Bye bye, folks. The musical interludes used on today's show were Remnants of Memories and Eclipse Homecoming, both from Xenoblade Chronicles 3, copyright Nintendo Monolith Soft, 2022.